Alright, there we are. Ladies and gentlemen, we are, well, I guess technically I still got in at 7:15 my time, but oh my gosh, just barely. Okay, so technically I'm not late. I'm just arriving precisely when I mean to, right? Clearly. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a while since we've done a React night, hasn't it? And I figured since that we've neared the end of one game, and probably won't be seeing to it for a little bit since we did reach a good stopping point, even if it ended on somewhat of a bitter note, but hey, I can always jump back in to amend that later. And I figured since that we reached a good stopping point, it's about time that I did some sort of React content, especially since I've been neglecting the crowd that arrived primarily for the response videos, especially the free-run one. So, my thought was, you know what? Whenever you're looking at pretty much any YouTube channel, there's always that one bad video. I've got it. Pretty much every channel we've covered has got it. Some channels have more than just one bad video, but that's beside the point. So, that in mind, I thought, you know what? We'll give it a second shot. We will take the time to look at some of the channels that we've looked at previously for response videos and figure out, alright, so if given a different topic, how well do you hold up? Are you able to give concise... Well, was it just a fluke, what we encountered with the videos that we've covered previously? Or is there something more going on, or something endemic, as it were, that is consistently occurring that would put somebody off? That's my thinking for tonight, so we'll see how well it goes. So I've got 3 videos for you tonight. One of them is a discussion on game genres by Lextorias. Another is more of a meta topic by Synthetic Man. And then we've got another video by Golden Owl talking about the healer role in a video game. So, we've got plenty to get through, as you can see based on the timestamps. So at this point, best thing we can do... Sorry about that. I forgot that my OS can do that. Alrighty. But we've got plenty to get to, so may as well just jump right into it, shall we? So, starting off on our first topic, I'll be curious to see where Lextorias goes with this. For those of you who who don't quite recall, he's the one who made that free-run video that got a lot of attention and a lot of people talking, and not necessarily in a positive way. So, there were some interesting arguments brought forth there, and I could see where he went awry, though I'll be curious to see what happens when you look at a subject that isn't necessarily related to something contentious. So, with game genre specifically, I'd be curious to see how he reaches the 18-minute mark, nearly the 19-minute mark, because there are arguments that can be made with respect to game genres about how you don't necessarily get a lot of... Well, if you look at the literal definitions of pretty much every game genre we have, I think there'd be very few exceptions to that. You look at the original definitions and go into semantics, there's a lot of weirdness. I mean, role-playing game? Congratulations, Are you playing Super Mario Odyssey? Congratulations, you are role-playing as Mario, clearly. Role-playing game, right? Even though we tend to associate that more with RPG elements, and all of us know, hey, when we say RPG elements, we mean progression systems, something that was inspired from Dungeons & Dragons. So, that's the neat part about language when you're digging into stuff like this, is that... What's the right way to frame it? So, words only are useful insofar as we all agree on a definition for them. And so, even if from an outsider's perspective it can look very weird when you have role-playing game as a genre that tends to be very specific, and even to some extent can be very broad unless you specify like action RPG or JRPG, there is still a common understanding within the gaming sphere of what those terms mean, and because of that, they stick around. In fact, I remember bringing up on the Jim Sterling response video the fact that, hey, roguelike versus roguelite, to try and distinguish between a traditional roguelike and a game that's introducing roguelike elements. So, interesting conversation to have. I'll be curious to see how he tries to expand on that. So, we'll go ahead and jump into it.
Video game genres are really weird and dumb and stupid, and I hate them. And I
Okay, very strong opening.
made this video to rant about it.
Alright, so very similar start to the free-run video, but much more simple and to the point, so respectable. Let's see what you got.
Genres as a concept have existed in every medium that has ever existed since basically the dawn of time. After all, us small-brained mammals love to put stuff into boxes. types of food, types of rocks, types of people. Really, we love nothing more than fitting a bunch of things into a bunch of different categories.
Yep, that's entirely fair. We understand things by virtue of not just what they are, but also what they are not. Comparison being a very useful tool, but also the enemy of joy if you're not careful. So, yes, that's a fair introduction to start out with. What else you got?
Well, almost as much as we love arguing over which is our favorite and then killing each other over it.
For genres, I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say killing over it, but then again, you did open up very strong, so you could just as easily read this as leaning into the whole idea of I'm going to take this super seriously and lean into that. So, you know what? I'm just being nitpicky.
But despite acting as a pretty handy excuse for causing every terrible event in human history, categories can also be a good thing. They act as a shorthand for descriptions. They let us communicate complex ideas in simpler ways without just starting from scratch every time. So instead of telling a friend this game has a leveling system and randomized loot, plus it lets you shoot people from a first-person perspective, you could just say it's an FPS with RPG elements.
I've heard the term looter shooter used for such things, but that's close enough. Oh, hey Lou, there are some people online who will kill for it. To be fair, those people usually are very far away and not able to actually act on it, but still.
And they'll know what you mean. Once a set of rules gets established and given a name, it's much easier to just refer to that instead and throw everything into that box. But what happens when that box fills up with too much stuff, or the rules we use for it become too broad? I mean, can you even tell me what makes something an RPG?
Yes. It has a progression system of some kind where you you gain experience, level up, and generally use those level ups, earn statistics that you use to improve a character. That's generally what I would consider RPG elements, but is there something specific you wanted to hone in on?
If it's just a game where you play a role, it would apply to literally every game ever made.
Okay, so the argument that I brought forward near the start of this, so that is the semantic argument that I expected, but you've got 19 minutes in this video. What else you got for me?
Okay, so what if we close the definition to something specific? Like any game with stats you can level up, weapons and armor you can loot.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, you could put that on pretty much any RPG. My gut instinct would apply that more to action RPGs, especially Diablo style, but you know what? That's fair.
Choices you can make in the story.
That's not necessarily accurate because there's not much of a choice when you're playing something like Diablo. Choice is an interesting one because it's a very specific kind of RPG that relies on it, usually CRPGs and the near direct descendants of them in Western RPGs, so stuff like Baldur's Gate. And even Baldur's Gate, that gives you some choices on how to resolve stuff, but there's very few that allow you to drastically alter the story. So that one I would contest a little bit.
And different playable characters and side quests and maybe an open world.
Yep, that's fair. Although, open world I would also contest because open world is a separate thing entirely, but hey, here we are. That's good enough for a baseline.
That seems a bit better, but it also means the most successful RPG ever made is Grand Theft Auto 5.
Can I see that list again?
Seems...
Okay, so, stats you can level up. Alright, I don't know enough about GTA 5 to contest that. Lootable weapons and armor. Okay, yeah, that would make sense, I presume, that you can pick up a gun that a henchman drops and use it yourself, I would presume. Choices made in the story, I don't know enough to contest. Playable characters, fair enough. Side quests, fair enough. Open world, fair enough. By your standards, yes. I would contest the open world part.
A bit better, but it also means the most successful RPG ever made is Grand Theft Auto 5.
And this is the part that I suspect will end up diverging a little bit. Because my thought is, when you're using language like this, what we typically default to is that we're looking for the most precise option possible. Where GTA 5 can be very much summarized as open world sandbox. And because of that, that is what people refer to because that is a much more specific definition than RPG. And so even if technically speaking, by your definition everything falls on that, people will still refer to it as an open world sandbox.
You see, base genres on their own are basically useless.
Not necessarily, but as we've discussed, but carry on.
Unless they're literally just technical descriptions like third-person shooter. So the answer to what
fair caveat.
happens when the box gets full is we just make another smaller box.
And that's a problem.
And we call those subgenres. A game is no longer just an RPG, now it's an isometric, narrative-driven CRPG.
And that's a problem.
Or a turn-based JRPG with life sim elements. And that helps a lot with building an idea of the game up in someone's mind, though it often still isn't enough.
How so? It seems like it's enough to me. I haven't seen anyone really... I brought up earlier the example of roguelike and roguelite, so I suppose there are people who can test that, the fact that the roguelite example even exists, but still. Excuse me?
I mean, what makes something a JRPG?
Well, that one I will grant you is a bit more flexible because Japan, the reason that it emerged, I suspect, back in the day was more so because it was a way to distinguish JRPG from what were considered at the time computer RPGs like would Ultima count among that? I'm trying to remember where Ultima was created. Hang on, I'm gonna make another window real quick. Excuse me. All right, Ultima, because I'm pretty sure Ultima would count as. Let's see. Huh. Okay, series of video games. Where were they made? Okay, so Electronic Arts. Okay, cool. So, yeah, that would be considered a Western RPG. So, trying to distinguish between games like Ultima and Baldur's Gate, as opposed to distinguishing between games like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy. That is my understanding for why there's a difference between where the term JRPG came from, in order to, especially since JRPGs typically showed up on consoles, which were simpler from a control standpoint, as compared to CRPGs that had the full keyboard to work with. So that's my understanding of where the term originated anyway.
Name would imply it's any RPG made in Japan, and yet I've never heard anyone use it to describe Dark Souls.
Well, that's because it's an action RPG. Because when people think of JRPG nowadays, they more often think of stuff, well, still like Final Fantasy, but also stuff like Xenoblade. Oh, speaking of which, hi, your troopers. So, in that case, what distinguishes Xenoblade as a JRPG for me and not an action RPG is because there's sometimes turn-based components to it, but actually, JRPG could be real-time or turn-based. I suppose that's not the major distinction. So the major distinction I would use is how complex the mechanics are and how many are layered on top of each other. Because JRPGs seemingly have, you look at something like Xenoblade and you have, just to use 3 as the example, since that's the one I've been playing most recently, you've got the gem crafting as a separate system, you've got experience in leveling up just broadly speaking, you've got accessories, you've got the classes you can use, the specific abilities each class has, you've got all of the interlinked nonsense that you can also level up alongside that, and arts you can and abilities you can select related to that. The way I see it is that the way Japan tends to design complex rule sets like this tends to have things very layered, whereas Western RPGs don't necessarily do that to the same degree, or rather there's the stacking systems generally are more simple on their face, and in my opinion it's easier to tell what's going on in a particular one. You see this crown thing? Yeah, I can see it, Lou. They're doing that for the chatter who speaks the most nowadays, so I don't know when they introduced that. I think I saw it on one of the Cuphead streams a few weeks ago, but yeah, it's a neat feature.
Don't lie to me. We all know when I say those 4 letters, you're thinking about Chrono Trigger or Persona or something.
Yeah. And your point is?
And I mean, it's not like the style of game we consider a JRPG is limited to being made in Japan. They're not region locked or something.
That is true to an extent. I have heard people say, I think it's Claire Obscurus. I think that's the exact name. Expedition 33, I think, is the other part of that title. That's been described as a JRPG because of it being mechanics-based. Although, again, it's a holdover from when the only 2 major differences were CRPG and JRPG, so the little eccentricities of language again.
You know, like to make one, you'd need to connect to a server in another country.
I don't see where you're going with this, but okay.
With like some sort of service, like a virtual private network. This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN.
Okay, that's where you were going with that. You know what? Fair enough. I will give, that was a stretch that threw me out of whack. I will grant you that very much felt very jarring, but you know what? Fair enough. Here's your sponsored segment. What do you tell us about Surfshark? I use Surfshark actually.
Surfshark is an app and browser extension that keeps you safe online by masking your IP address and letting you virtually travel the world. With just a click of a button or tap of a finger, you can connect to over 3,000 servers in 100 countries, meaning you get access to location-restricted content while staying safe online thanks to military-grade encryption.
Alright, I don't know about the military-grade encryption part. That's the first time I've heard that, but you know what? Fairly standard ad read so far. Carry on.
As someone who lives in Canada, I know very
That explains a lot.
well that places like Netflix love to lock certain shows to American servers. But with Surfshark VPN, all I have to do is turn it on and connect to those servers. And now I can watch whatever I want. I also love the peace of mind that I get browsing the internet, knowing that even if I'm on public Wi-Fi or I'm traveling abroad, nobody can see what I'm browsing, what I've downloaded, or any of my embarrassing Google searches. And get this.
Those are very tame user searches that you could go for, but then again, you can't. Well, you don't want to show us the not safe for work ones, eh?
One subscription lets you connect as many devices as you want, meaning you can go ahead and share Surfshark with all your friends to let them enjoy all these great features too. So why don't you go ahead and protect yourself today? Get Surfshark VPN at surfshark.deals/Lextorias and enter promo code Lextorias for an exclusive offer and 3 months extra for free.
Alright, I don't know if that code is still good. Fairly standard ad read, nothing to complain about there.
Thank you to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Back to whatever I was talking about. Okay, so describing a game with just genres and subgenres is still very hard and doesn't often paint that clear a picture of exactly what the game is. So why don't we do something much easier and just say it's like Dark Souls?
Well, we do. I mean, I don't like the term MOBA, so I say it's like, so I just refer to them as Dota-style games. What? Is there a butt coming, or am I just jumping the gun again?
Oh, it's like Dark Souls. Well, I played Dark Souls, and I understand the stamina mechanics and bonfire system, so now I have a very clear idea of what this game is like. And you're telling me there's a bunch of games that are all very similar to Dark Souls and share those mechanics? Well, why don't we put them all in a box and call that box Souls-like?
Ah, that's where you're going with this. Fair enough. Carry on.
How convenient. I'm sure that won't cause any problems.
Has it?
Now, with this type of game, which I've dubbed the like genre, there's a sort of life cycle that they all
Wait, you've dubbed it. I mean, I feel like that's a common thing that I've seen elsewhere, but never mind me. I'm just nitpicking.
This type of game, which I've dubbed the like genre, there's a sort of life cycle that they all go through, where initially a game comes out that is so influential or unique that it sets a standard. Think of something like Doom, which was pretty much in a league of its own when it comes to shooters.
Yeah, that's fair. Pretty much every shooter for a long time was considered a Doom clone. Heretic is a Doom clone with a fantasy spin. Shadow Warrior was actually first it was Duke Nukem, that was a Doom clone, but crass. And then Shadow Warrior was a Doom clone like Duke Nukem that was crass in a different way.
It wasn't the first-person shooter. It wasn't even the first popular one.
Yeah, that would... Oh, actually, I'm trying to remember. Which did come out first, Wolfenstein or Doom? Because they were pretty close to each other.
But it was so popular that years afterward, any game with gameplay even somewhat similar was dubbed a Doom clone.
Alright, good. You know your history.
Until FPS finally became a common term. Though this is mostly because a lot of games did come out that just tried to be one-for-one copies of Doom. Clone is a bit of a harsh description for any game not trying to be one though, which is why terms like Zelda clone or GTA clone never really stuck around to become full-fledged genres. Souls-like, however, stuck hard.
Well, that's just because Dark Souls ended up sticking out in general at a time when the internet, by the time the internet had cemented, and the fact that literally everyone was saying the Dark Souls of insert whatever nonsense here. So the Dark Souls of peanut butter sandwiches, I'm pretty sure you'd find somewhere with how ridiculous that term got out. So there was a virality to it that definitely was not matched for things like Zelda and whatnot.
Because on top of your typical Lords of the Fallen value brand ripoffs, you also had games that took certain elements or worked off the formula to make something new. They were like Dark Souls, but not trying to be Dark Souls.
I've even heard Hollow Knight described as such, basically taking the Souls-like ideas and putting them in a Metroidvania.
So the defining traits of the genre had to open up from one-to-one clone to anything with the classic dodge roll, stamina, bonfire, lose souls when you die type stuff.
Fair enough. that been up to? I consider Zelda a JRPG? Yeah, I guess by the standard I've set out, it technically counts. Though, I'd say, well, I'm used to calling it an action-adventure, though the problem with that is, well, the problem you see there is that action-adventure is even more generic than RPG, depending on how you look at it. Or technically classify Mario as a JRPG. You don't level up in the same way for Mario, so I'd hesitate to refer to it as such. But I would not actually call it that. Okay, fair enough. I need to read further. Except Mario RPG, fair enough. That is, and the Paper Mario games, presumably.
But then, as the genre grows, it starts incorporating more and more games that do things differently. And some of them don't use dodge rolls at all, or completely change up the checkpoint system.
Yeah, I mean, Jedi Fallen Order, I played that one. That's on my list to test for my Linux PC right now. And that is technically a Souls-like in its mechanics, though it relies more on blocking than it does on dodging.
This category that was created entirely as a shorthand to refer to one specific style of game now has many games in it that don't look anything like the Souls series.
And is that a problem?
To refer to them as Souls-likes kinda defeats the point of being that specific to begin with. But if they're not Souls-likes, we don't have any term we can use to describe them.
Not necessarily. You can still describe Hollow Knight as a Metroidvania, even if you don't mention the bonfire mechanic. There's still... because the mechanics aren't necessarily confined to a single genre. They can pop in and out as you dang well please, and it's useful to have them... Yes, in this case, the Souls-like is much more a representation, not necessarily of the gameplay style, but of the underlying mechanics. So I don't necessarily see that as an issue.
This box is overflowing with stuff again, and nobody has found another one to put the excess in.
Care to offer a solution? Actually, looks like we're getting to the end. Oh, and you're mentioning the roguelike example. This is going to be fun.
Well, until you get to roguelites. No, not roguelikes, the genre defined by games that are like Rogue, roguelites.
Yup. Credit to Total Biscuit back in, what was it, 2017? Rest in peace, you beautiful bastard.
The genre defined by games that are kinda like Rogue, but not enough like Rogue to be called a roguelike.
But the problem with that term is that roguelike and roguelite sound so familiar. So, here we are.
But there's still enough like Rogue that we can categorize them by how like Rogue they are. You just can't call them roguelikes because those games are more like Rogue than these games that are like Rogue or like Rogue.
Well, to put it into simpler terms because he's intentionally being silly, Hades is a roguelite because it has the permadeath aspect built into it, and then you're going through a dungeon and all that fun stuff, but it's not a roguelike in the same sense that Dungeons of Dreadmore is. What's the premise of this rant exactly? It's right here. Game genres are kind of trash. That's how it started. Your troopers?
Which is why some people also call them roguelike likes. Do you see how stupid that sounds? It's an attempt to...
Yeah, that was discussed as an option. I remember those conversations well when the roguelikes trend began back in the day.
To solve the problem of specificity, but in the worst way possible. In a way that is way more confusing, to the point where most people just ignore this distinction and call everything a roguelike anyways.
Yeah, that is the risk you take with that. Because, let's see, are there any among this list that I would consider actual roguelikes? No, honestly, Rogue is the only one. Literally the only one. Because not a turn-based dungeon crawler, not a turn-based... So that's real-time, pseudo-real-time, but not a dungeon crawler. Not, well, real-time, mostly. Turn-based, but not a dungeon crawler. I'm not sure how to describe Spelunky. People describe it as a... I guess it sort of counts as a roguelike. Opinionated opinion is very opinionated. Welcome to the internet!
And for what? The most concrete definition we have of the difference between light and like is something called the Berlin interpretation.
Okay, I'm gonna let that sit. I think I hear a cat outside. You want something, dude? My cat seems to want something. I'm gonna leave the door ajar and see what he does.
Which says if a game isn't grid-based, turn-based, and non-modal, among a dozen other factors...
Oh, okay, so he's trying to give the exact specificity for a roguelike, and he just had a term to coin for it. Fair enough.
It's not a true roguelike.
I probably should have seen that coming given the free-run video.
Now I'll give you a second to try and think of how many grid-based, turn-based, non-modal games have come out in the last year or so.
In the last year? Actually, if... You know what? I have Steam up right now. Hang on. I'm just going to go onto Steam and search for roguelike. They count Peak as a roguelike? What? Okay, sort title by release date. see. What the heck is that? Okay, there's a lot of guff in here. Right, I need to remember this is Steam we're talking about. You end up with a lot of guff, don't you? Yeah, just out of blush, there's very little on here that I suspect could be considered a traditional roguelike. And to be fair, traditional roguelikes are fairly rare nowadays given the circumstances anyway, because the exact mechanics and the ideas have been applied to so many other things that you are effectively awash in choice with respect to that. You want something, cat? You just gonna keep meowing at me until I let you out or something? Is that all this is? Yeah, probably. Let me reset my setup real quick. Alright, sorry boys, be right back. Alright, we'll see if the other cat comes knocking at some point tonight. Sorry about that.
Oh, what? You can't think of anything?
In the last year, yes. Though, to be fair, what notable games have released in the last year? Let's see. Player Obscurus. Shows you how much I've been paying attention, I guess. I've been in my own world to an extent. I'll talk about that at the end.
You're telling me games with fucking ASCII art aren't popping off right now?
Okay. Good one. Although, is ASCII art on this Berlin interpretation? That seems awfully arbitrary.
Huh, that's weird. I understand the thought process behind roguelite, since it's the same thought process I brought up with Souls-like. If you specifically enjoy games that are actually like Rogue and you go and try to search for them, you're gonna get bombarded with a bunch of Binding of Isaac clones more than anything.
Is that so common? I mean, to be fair, I saw all sorts of random crap when I did a cursory glance through Steam on another monitor, but still. You know what? I don't know enough to dispute that. I'll leave that be.
But at this point, we've clearly seen that roguelike is the more popular broad term.
Yep.
So trying to wrench it away from games like Hades to apply it to like 20 games that came out in the 90s is just fighting a losing battle.
Yeah, and that is what people are running into. And to be fair, in Hades' case, they took advantage of that fairly well. I mean, the tagline of godlike roguelike, I mean, you can't beat that. It doesn't hit the same if it's godlike roguelite. No. I can see why they went from that from a marketing standpoint, since that there are enough roguelike elements present. Even though I would call it a roguelite, but what, at this point, you know what? I do have game dev ambitions. I was working on a different kind of game. Should I just make a roguelike to prove a point? A proper one? Should I even do ASCII art just to really prove a point? Maybe. What would I do with it, I wonder? Ideas anyway.
Sorry, that's just how language works. If you want to come up with some term for your classic roguelikes, just call them something like classic roguelikes, or true roguelikes, or, and this is a wild idea, just say these games are like Rogue.
Okay, calm down, sir. Let's see, cats rule and humans do what they're told. In the case of the older cat, yes, absolutely. Cheeto gets a bit more guff.
So anyway, Super Metroid in 1994 and Castlevania Symphony of the Night in 1997 were pivotal and iconic games, in much the same way Doom and Dark Souls were. So like Doom, the elements they used became genres, and like Souls-like and roguelikes, their genres expanded over time as more games fit into them. And many years later, we have the abomination that is Metroidvania.
How's that an abomination? I've heard of worse combinations of words than that.
I mean, the name itself comes from combining Castlevania and Metroid, and yet the original Castlevania isn't a Metroidvania.
So?
Which is confusing.
So?
The genre is defined by non-linear interconnected level design, and progression gated by the use of certain unlockable abilities, which isn't a thing in Castlevania 1.
So?
That game is very linear. Those elements would only be hinted at in Castlevania 2, and even then the genre-defining parts were all from Symphony of the Night.
Then, if that's what people know though, is that necessarily a problem?
Which was 10 games later.
So?
Specifically from the mind of Koji Igarashi, who took inspiration from the early Zelda games. Leave it up to him and the genre would be called Zeldavania because he wasn't even aware of the connection to Metroid until people pointed it out to him.
Interesting. So let's see what he put down. We really wanted to extend the life of our game, said Igarashi, and the one game that popped up in our heads was Legend of Zelda, an exploration-filled action game. Well, given the original Zelda, that makes sense to me. And actually, A Link to the Past, and I don't know enough about Zelda 2, so I can't speak on that one. But yeah, between the first one and A Link to the Past, yeah, I can see that. Let's see. Pretty much our entire team, including myself, were huge fans of the game, and we wanted to make something similar. So now you know the origin of inspiration actually wasn't Metroid. Oh, that's fair. Even so, Igarashi is happy that his Castlevania games are associated with Metroid, although he didn't actually learn of the term Metroidvania until around 2 years later, when he noticed fans posting about it on Facebook. "I like the name and I respect it," said Igarashi, "and I like the meaning behind it. It fits very well, so I'm actually kind of honored that Metroid, the name, is attached to Castlevania, and that it morphed into this one word, so I like it very much." So, he seems to be on board with it. Why don't you seem to be on board with it?
But obviously the genre can't be called Zeldavania, because part of the Metroidvania style is that 2D platformer level design that was perfected by Super Metroid.
I mean, for a lot of Metroidvanias, that's the case. Counterpoint Metroid Prime. Entirely. Please be good, Metroid Prime 4. I will be a very disappointed gamer if you aren't. Oh man, I've been waiting since I was a teenager for that, damn it.
Games like Hollow Knight and Ori and the Blind Forest clearly take inspiration from that. Yet, there are so many games described as Metroidvania that aren't 2D platformers.
Because games like Metroid Prime exist. It's broader than just the 2D platforming part. That's incidental.
Like, you know, Metroid Prime.
That's exactly why I'm mentioning it. What's the problem here?
Which, fun fact, some people might not even describe as a Metroidvania, because on top of the whole
well, those people are silly
2D platformer thing, a key part of the genre is the RPG elements that Symphony of the Night introduced. You heard me right.
So?
Not only is Castlevania not a Metroidvania, to some people, neither are most Metroid games.
Those people are silly then.
In order to confuse things even further, I've seen people come up with things like Metroid-like, Metroidvania-like, Castleroid, and even Classicvania to specifically refer to all the pre-Symphony of the Night titles. Which, at that point, what are we even doing here? If you need to come up with a whole genre to encompass less than a dozen games, you have a problem.
Well, is that just trying to pay too much homage to Castlevania and not recognizing where it took inspiration from elsewhere? Because if it's just 2D side-scroller before it gets the mechanics that we know of as Metroidvania, is that necessarily an issue? You could just call them 2D side-scrollers and just say, alright, calm down, guys. Is there really a problem here?
Just call them Castlevania games that came out before Symphony of the Night. We don't need a catchy name and category for them.
That's
really,
fair.
The Metroidvania genre is such a weird, backwards case study compared to roguelike or Souls-like. Because unlike those genres, or pretty much anything else, it is entirely derived from two separate games that only share a couple things in common.
Well, the two things in common are the parts that people are most interested in, namely the level design based around unlocking, well, the non-linear level design based around unlocking stuff. That is the core, and that's what people think of when they think Metroidvania. Hell, I didn't know Hollow Knight was a Metroidvania when I bought it. I distinctly remember, I think it was 2020, and Humble Bundle was offering, hey, we're basically saying, hey, $30 for a ton of games. We'll send it to help people get through the pandemic. I remember seeing that thinking, alright, I can use an excuse to play Hollow Knight. I'll check it out. I have no idea what this is. I've heard good things. And then I play about an hour or two and I realize, oh, this is a Metroidvania because of the level design. That was something I instantly clued in on because it was a useful term. What's the problem here?
And are part of different franchises that don't even fit into the genre named after them.
If you squint at it correctly, maybe, and use a very specific aspect of the definition, but most people, when they think Metroidvania, they think the level design, not the RPG mechanics. If they want to say that, they'll add in the RPG mechanics.
You can't measure something as a Metroidvania based on how close it is to Castlevania or Metroid, because even Castlevania and Metroid aren't 100% Metroidvania. We're basing the genre off a weird hypothetical game that doesn't even exist.
It does exist. Never mind. I knew exactly what I was getting into with this video, and yet I'm still getting annoyed by it. Well, I wasn't worried about that. I'm learning a lot of new lingo that I will hopefully never use. Oh man. No problem that I've taken note of. Well, we're old farts, George Troopers, relative to these youngins that are up and coming. Never mind me.
And all because Metroidvania is way more fun to say than Symphony of the Night-like. Though I guess I should be thankful we're not in the timeline where Castleroid took off.
That would be hilarious, though. And to be fair, Metroidvania, even if you know nothing about Castlevania, you could wonder about that, but never mind.
Jesus Christ, I think I would have given up gaming altogether if I had to hear people say that unironically.
I don't hear Metroidvania all that much either, so I don't think... I think you'd be fine.
Okay, but surely there's an example of a like genre that does things right. Right? Well... no. But hey, did you know that the adventure game is actually a like genre? And no, it's not a genre built around the idea of adventure, because that would apply to like every game ever.
Okay, where are you going with this?
Actually, the adventure in adventure game specifically refers to 1976's Colossal Cave Adventure, a text-based, exploration-focused puzzle game. So technically, the more apt term to use for the genre would be adventure-like.
Is that the case? You know what? We'll take it as true for the moment.
Since it works off a similar premise to Souls-like and roguelike.
I mean, it just looks like one of those old text-based RPGs you'd find back in the day where you did literally everything through text. Basically a little more than choose your own adventure with a computer handling things instead of flipping back and forth between pages, but where are you going with this?
Stuff like King's Quest, Monkey Island, and Myst are...
no, those are point and clicks. Those are point and clicks. I'm going to disagree with you on that.
all adventure games. Uncharted and Tomb Raider are not.
Okay, it actually... To give the devil its due... Why did I say it like that? I lost my train of thought. Sorry, boys. Where was I going with that? What's Chad up to? Poor kids. Oh boy. I am getting old if I'm saying stuff like that. Moving on.
Because the key tenets of the genre involve puzzle solving, exploration, narrative, a hero protagonist, and collection of objects.
Okay, so is all of that present in the adventure game that you're mentioning? Because would I call Myst an adventure? It's certainly more exploratory. Well, it's certainly very exploratory. I guess you are venturing through different... I guess it counts. Though, with the way you're using it, it's more... Well, I guess instead of pure text-based using visuals, I guess you could squint and make it look the same way. Oh, well, let's see what else you have.
Wouldn't that make Uncharted an adventure? Fuck. Okay, well, adventure games were...
Well, yes, they do call it action-adventure.
Originally all of that, but more focused on the text-based or point-and-click type of gameplay.
Okay, good. The clarification. That's what I was needing.
A hallmark of the genre is basically no action or combat whatsoever. Plus, narrative in this context is more meant to be about piecing together the story through the gameplay.
Yep, that's also fair, given one of the examples you brought forth was Myst.
Like all the other like genres, they just had to expand the definition to the point that it basically became meaningless. Unlike roguelike and Souls-like though, adventure games didn't have a major resurgence or rebranding. They didn't try to call every game that came after diet adventure games or something stupid. Mostly because, adventure games are dead, with
they are niche. They are not dead.
One of the death knells being in 1998, when popular game developer Sierra was sold to Cuck International.
That is an unfortunate name.
Or, well, the
okay, good one.
original text-based game mostly died out in the West.
Oh yeah, the text-based stuff absolutely died.
In Japan, however, adventure games have been and still are incredibly popular. Because
Really?
Guess what? All visual novels are adventure games.
I guess if you squint at it right, you can look at it in that context. I think this entire rant is missing context and purpose. Well, the only context that he really gave was effectively deciding, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna start out this video by just saying I hate game genres that's all wonky and stupid and language is awful. And I'm gonna rant about it. That's basically how he started this. So, not missing context, missing purpose, well, I guess it's technically fulfilling the purpose he had in mind, though I'm sat there going, okay, yeah, language is fun, but I see these more as interesting aspects of language more so than problems.
I don't even care about nuance here. They're the same thing. Try to leave a comment about it. I dare you.
You know what? I shouldn't tell you to go leave a comment, as that could be considered brigading, but you know what? I'm not going to even imply that. No, don't leave a comment on this video. Don't, unless you are being polite.
Everything from Kojima's Snatcher and Police Knots to whatever dating sim you can scrape off the bottom of the new releases tab on Steam.
Implying it would be at the bottom half the time, but then again, it depends on your Steam algorithm.
These games are all very clearly in the same category, and they make up the majority of games made in Japan.
Is that the... You know what? Actually, given how quickly they could be churned out relative to a highly complex RPG, you know what? I'll buy that.
Whereas in the West, the tradition of exploration and puzzle-focused narrative games also transformed into things like the Stanley Parable and The Witness, alongside Heavy Rain and Telltale games.
Yeah, that's fair.
And... oh my god, I haven't even brought up walking sims yet. Oh.
You just did with the Stanley Parable, but you know what? You probably don't want to get started on that because... actually... Where are you going to go with this? Please elaborate.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, basically games like Gone Home, Dear Esther, Stanley Parable, etc. are direct continuations of the adventure game, where the focus is on exploration and puzzles with little to no action or combat. Specifically, these newer games didn't even have failure states or game overs.
Which annoyed a lot of people when they started coming out, though, to be fair, they exist in their own largely harmless ecosystem off to the side. Again, niche.
Which for some reason made a large portion of the internet so angry they invented the term walking simulator to insult them.
I wouldn't necessarily say angry, because I think the issue at hand when they were trying to describe them as video games is that there's an there was a belief that, hey, the fact that it is a video game doesn't just mean it's interactive, it means that there is going to be some modicum of challenge, even if it's, well, hell, even some of the very simple and easy to understand point and clicks back in the day that were designed explicitly for children, even they technically had opportunities where you could mess up in the moment and where you had to puzzle through something. Where there may not necessarily be a failure state, there's no permanent game over, even then, there was a degree to which you had to puzzle through a solution. So, the problem that people had at the time was that they were trying to effectively say, I'm a video game, when, to a lot of people, they were missing a lot, a core component of what makes a video game, the fact that you can fail. So, that was what drove a lot of the derision, and it isn't, well, and because of that, I think the only one that got, I don't know if mainstream attention is the correct word, but widespread respectability, I believe, was stuff like the Stanley Parable, which was intentionally parodying the whole idea of it by allowing you to go in any direction you want and directly go against the narrator, and had all sorts of fun with that. So, that's the conversation he's referring to.
Because if you can't shoot a Nazi or a demon or a terrorist, then it must not even really be a video game.
That is a very disingenuous way of framing it, but never mind me.
Just ignore the fact that the term grew in popularity at the exact same time as Gamergate, and was...
oh, God, we're not even to Synthetic Man yet. Why are you bringing up culture war crap? No, go away!
Famously used to attack a game about a queer person.
We're just gonna move on from that. I don't want to get myself in trouble.
That is completely unrelated.
Yes, it is completely unrelated. Why the hell did you bring it up? Come the hell. I mean, I already knew you had that leaning, so I expected that take, or should have, but come on, why are you bringing up culture war bullshit in this? Oh well. Moving on.
Probably. And
I don't like you.
Since 2014, the term walking sim has been used much more positively to describe these games, in a sort of ironic reclaiming of the word.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Though, people have tried to come up with alternatives like narrative game or empathy game.
What? Elaborate.
Which we all know won't stick because gamers don't know what that is. Anyways,
I don't like you.
Over 4 decades after the original Colossal Cave adventure,
I have no idea what's going on now. Short version, crazy things happened in 2014, around the same time as Dear Esther came out and the whole conversation around Walking Simulator was happening. And because Lextorias appears a little too plugged into the culture war, he's either aware of it or may have even been present during it, and just had to dredge it up because why?
The adventure game genre is a rare case of a category being built on one specific type of game and actually having the freedom to branch off into multiple other distinct categories. Point and clicks, visual novels, walking sims, you name it. They managed to separate themselves and become their own thing.
You mean like literally every other subgenre?
Instead of being limited to the framework of the original game.
You mean like literally every other subgenre?
Which is even funnier to think about when you know that Colossal Cave Adventure is cited as the main inspiration for Rogue. That's right. If you want to be pedantic about genre names, every roguelike is technically just an adventure light.
And? So?
Fuck you.
We're not even to Synthetic Man yet. Why am I getting this annoyed? Monkey Island has no fail states? Well, there's technically no fail states in the adventure games I mentioned that are explicitly designed for children. But there are points where you can mess up a puzzle and do have to puzzle through stuff, so still, I feel it holds. Let's see. What else is chat up to? Adventure game's dead? How can you label a specific game as adventure if not defined? And how do you apply another label of dead when you've never defined the subject properly? Oh boy.
Now, don't get me wrong, adventure games have their purist fans, just like everything else. I'm sure there are people out there saying if a game isn't text-based, it's dead to them. But I'd like to think that it's at least a good starting point for what can happen when we don't limit ourselves to these arbitrarily strict rules and naming conventions.
Then find a different naming convention if it bothers you so much.
Remember, all these words are made up.
So, literally all words are made up. What's your damn point?
That's how words work.
Yes?
And we made them up to help us communicate better. The whole reason we invented these definitions and put all these games into boxes is just to make our lives easier when we talk about them. But what should be obvious, however many minutes into this video we are, is that when you care too much about the words and definitions, you just end up making things more confusing.
Not necessarily, because the words we use are important, and I don't mind when people do get into major semantics. In fact, here, I'll bring up an example from the Freerun response video I did back in December, which you had made, I think it was about a month before. So the whole difference between, because you had used, I think, the word immoral to describe, well, you were using words that suggested that you meant to say amoral when you actually said immoral. We're going to make a big deal out of stuff like that. Because the words are useful, well, because we all understand what they mean. So, it is worth making a big deal out of this and making sure that we are all on the same page, even if there is confusion in the moment.
If someone wants to call a game a roguelike because it has permadeath and randomized levels, who cares that it's not turn-based?
I care a little bit.
You and I both know what they're talking about.
Yeah, but I care a little bit.
If you want to say that Dark Souls isn't a JRPG, even though it's made in Japan, yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of weird to split games into country of origin anyways. You know what Japan calls RPGs made in America? Yoge Kusuge, which means shitty Western game.
No comment.
Let game genres be fluid. Let them adapt and change with the times.
They've always been like that. Do I need to point out my playthrough of Battlezone?
Or even straight up die if they need to. As long as they make things easier to talk about, they've done their job. If they're no longer doing that job, it's time to change things.
Then come up with an alternative.
Stop missing the forest for the suspiciously rogue-shaped trees.
Then come up with the alternative. Encoding overload? What are you on about, computer? Hang on. Let's see, handbrake is off. Yeah, it was only a brief blip, so it's probably fine.
Stop trying to come up with more rules and regulations and exceptions to these completely made-up terms. Start making up new ones.
You do it!
Better ones.
You do it!
Preferably before people start unironically using the word Souls-Light, because
Okay, that would be funny if people actually did that. Should I start referring to Hollow Knight as that just to piss people off? That sounds hilarious.
I swear to God, if that happens, I'm gonna fucking lose it. Language sucks, video games are complicated, none of this really matters or is
Yes, it does!
important. So why don't we just relax and try and be a bit more open when it comes to how we talk about this stuff?
You literally just said gamers don't have empathy. I'm not accepting that coming from you.
After all, genres are weird and dumb and stupid, and I would hate if they stayed that way.
Here we go.
Alright, so is there anything towards the end? It looks like he's just rambling or going off with Patreon stuff, so we'll leave it there. Okay. I expected nothing and was still disappointed. Okay, that's mean. That's mean. There is a legitimate conversation to be had around how crazy language can be, but that was a bit overkill. Even by my standards. I like getting mixed up in semantics like that, but that was gross overkill. Should have seen that coming, I guess, given how the Freerun video turned out, but you know what? There we are. Alright, let's see. Is there anything I need to worry about in chat? Walking Simulator, does FF13 count? It has more than walking, even if it's a lot of walking, by my understanding of it. Is there anything else? Castleroid, that's what I call my... Okay, calm down, your troopers. Anything else I need to check on? I think that's it. I don't care, call it Granny's Peach Tea for all I care. Oh no, I don't need to think about that movie right now. At some point, although to be fair, the latest Superman film's discourse has been fascinating to me, but that's a topic for another time perhaps. Alrighty, so that was video number 1. The only relevant input I have, I still call Zelda a championship. Alright, you have your fun doing that. So, next video. This is the one that I am the most personally interested in. Okay, so can I get rid of the spinning wheel? Yes, good, thank God. Okay, that would bother me. So, this is the one that I'm the most personally interested in. So, Synthetic Man was the second channel I made a response video to, because I had seen his Tears of the Kingdom response, well, Tears of the Kingdom video, I should say, and I had seen it get a lot of attention, and had seen, I think, maybe 1 or 2 clips from it, and I thought, okay, I've seen how he approaches a game like God of War Ragnarok because I'm subscribed to Mauler and keep up with EFAP every now and then. Not as much lately since they've been doing doing a lot more breakdowns on stuff that I've largely tapped out on. So, by virtue of that, I'm sat here going, okay, how good's the Tears of the Kingdom take? And oh god. And one of the main criticisms that people levy towards Synthetic Man, besides being too deep in the weeds when it comes to the culture war, is the fact that he doesn't script his videos. Hence the title, You Should Script Your Videos. So, there are so since that this is something that I brought forth, I think it makes sense to try and see exactly what he says about it, even though 2709 we could be here a while. Though, I was expecting that, to be fair. So, before I see what he has to say, I think it's important to start by saying what legitimate reasons could exist for someone wanting to not script their videos. Because there are legitimate reasons. If you're only doing a first impression, like what a lot of what Synthetic Man does, even if he brands it as reviews, I prefer to use the term first impression with what he described in his Zelda video. If you're just doing first impressions, and you are upfront about that, there's an understanding that, hey, I'm not going to know everything. If there are inaccuracies or something is clarified later or something else to that effect, yeah, that's fine. We understand that. Total Biscuit basically did that as his bread and butter, so I'd be a hypocrite if I went after you for that. You could also see it as a time-saving measure. If you are very confident that you'll be able to say what you need to in the video without off the cuff, then you could say, all right, I'll just say it off the cuff, I'll do whatever retakes are required later, and then make sure afterward, hey, just the time I would have spent scripting it out and making sure my arguments are airtight can then instead be spent on editing to make sure that my line delivery is good, to make sure that it's visually pleasing, to make sure the thumbnail's good, and to make sure that I can just cover more stuff, potentially. And alongside that, it could just be a stylistic choice, that you want it to be off the cuff, and you want it to be obvious that it's off the cuff. More of a raw reaction, even if you won't necessarily be 100% accurate for everything. The fact that you will have people who will do hours-long breakdowns of a film on stream, where it is possible that they overlook stuff even with all that time spent. So there are legitimate reasons for why you wouldn't script a video, but I'd be curious to know what Synthetic Man's reasons for it, because honestly, I'm already hesitant to say that it's a bad idea. To let go of my reasons for why he should script his videos. And there's two reasons. One, when you're making a review, the script, in my opinion, is everything. Because what is the point of me making a review on a video game? I am trying to explain my thoughts in a coherent manner of what I think of the game overall, digging into very specific things, oftentimes. And so, in order to make sure my arguments are concise when you're dealing with something as complex as a video game, with a lot of different things that interact between stuff like artwork and music and sound effects and the game mechanics themselves and all the game mechanics linking up with each other, how do all of them mesh together, what's the final product, how well does it reflect in the story, it can get very complicated, and to sort all of that out, you would want an outline at least, and a script ideally, in order to make sure your thoughts are in order and that everything is good to go. So the idea of abandoning a script to me is honestly quite silly. There are people who can pull it off, and there is an audience for that sort of off-the-cuff thing, but if you're going to do that, you may as well do it in a live environment, or signpost at the start, hey, this is as far as I got into the game, this is a first impression, here's what I have to say. So that's one argument, and the second is precisely because of how Synthetic Man conducts himself. Because, as I said earlier, he is deep in the weeds when it comes to the culture war. And when you are as deep into the weeds as you are in the culture war as Synthetic Man is, there is a perception of your ideological oppositions not merely being incorrect or misguided, but outright evil. That they are willing to do whatever it takes in order to achieve their objectives, whatever they may be, and are willing to destroy whatever stands in their way, which presumably would include you, Synthetic Man. So, when you are that deep in the weeds, and I'm not going to discuss the merits of whether that actually holds true, whether they would actually cancel you or what have you. I'm not here to do anything of the sort or make any sort of stuff like that. I see myself as neutral in that argument, explicitly so. I did think about getting involved at one point, but honestly, I get too hot-headed around this sort of thing, so best for me to just be the guy to say, oi, you're going too far, knock it off. So, that in mind, when you are that deep in the weeds and think that your opposition is that abhorrent, there are two approaches you can take. If you believe that they are going to misrepresent you, that they will twist your arguments, take you out of context, attempt to cancel or discredit you, whatever it might be, then one approach is to simply say, well, if you're going to do that anyway, I may as well not care, say what I mean what I say, just lay it all out there, let everybody know what I think. Which, there is a certain amount of respectability you can gain from that. And for people who are already on your side, that is often seen as a breath of fresh air, that you just lay it all out like that without concern. And you'll see that even in in situations that are less high stakes, when you see someone try and effectively recreate old YouTube before they inevitably get banned for terms of service violations. So there is a certain merit that people see in that, but the problem you run into is that if you truly believe that your opposition is that terrible, you shouldn't be under the impression that you're going to convince them of anything. You should instead be focused on saying, hey, how do I appeal to the people who may otherwise listen to what those evil people have to say and bring them over to my side? And as a result, my thought was, okay, you need to be very careful about what you say. You need to be very careful about what you do. And as a result of that, I'm sat here going, wait, you're going to be the shoot from the hip guy, say it how you see it, and very provocative to the point where any uninformed normie is going to say, wait a minute, you said what about the Zonai again? What the hell is wrong with you? Are you okay? You know what? I don't know what you represent, but I don't want to go anywhere near that. You are going to have people like that when you go off the deep end like that are just completely shut aside and just completely ignore your ideas or arguments or anything to do with you, to where you become an albatross around your movement's neck. So, because of that, my thought is, okay, I already have trouble accepting the idea that you can manage just fine without the script because I've seen how your videos look. And I accept it even less because of how deep in the culture war you are, because it is the tactics of someone who is either stupid, a grifter, or believes that he has no impact. And personally, I don't think you're a grifter. I think you genuinely do believe what you say, for better or worse. But, well, I suppose time will tell. For all I know, you may be able to convince me that, hey, I can hack it. I mean, you're not going to convince me of that. I've seen your work, but perhaps you could convince me that, hey, there are merits to not worrying about the script. There are merits to going off the cuff. So, to try and respect that, my thinking is, all right, I will simply look at this live. I will take away the script for myself, and we'll see how I do when I'm reacting to it live, right? We'll see if I end up proving my point, if I end up making an ass of myself, right? So, let's see what you have to say, Synthetic Man.
Oh, since I'm moving out of my house in the next couple of weeks, I didn't want to leave you guys without a video, so let's talk about some common criticisms of my channel.
Alright, so I don't know if you necessarily needed the personal detail, but very well. Not the worst introduction.
Now, I do want to say up front, this is not going to be some kind of crazy angry rant video, because I think some of the criticisms are pretty legitimate, and even the ones that aren't are simply misguided.
Alright, so we'll see if that ends up bearing out.
And I think most of you are actually pretty happy with the direction of my channel, seeing as my like-dislike ratio has never been higher on average.
Alright, fair enough.
Still far below.
Well, to be fair, that is your dedicated core, as I mentioned earlier. The dedicated core is absolutely going to like you being the abrasive bastard and just say it how you feel. So, the core is going to be happy. The question is, how much good are you actually doing?
Below most other YouTubers, but generally in the last 6 months I've covered things most people don't like, and so when I shit on it, you're pretty okay with it. That said, there are some prevailing criticisms, critiques, whatever you want to call them, that keep coming up, and so I want to address some of those again. Let's start off with one that has been around ever since my channel started taking off, that being the "you should be more professional" crowd.
Now, actually, hang on. There is a cat at my door. Hang on. It's the other cat. You have something to say, good? I'm not in a position where I can easily walk away, but you want something, Cheeto? Or are you just gonna stare at me? Yes, please. I need something to distract from how serious things just got. Alright, he's eventually gonna make his way in. Eventually he'll figure out, oh, that's how you got in. Cool. You could have just pushed the door open more, but so be it. Alright, I'll probably need to see him in a couple of minutes, so let's go ahead and address the point he made. So, just to make sure I have it, let's bring up the transcript, because this is something very useful that if you're doing YouTube stuff. So, the "you should be more professional" crowd. So, that one I will concede is not necessarily all that important to me specifically, because honestly, I mean, I'm a guy doing this in his house with the microphone, and I'm getting interrupted, letting a cat interrupt me. If I wanted professionalism, I would embody it. I do try and keep myself more straight-laced, especially when I'm doing a review specifically, because I want to take it seriously and I want to give an argument, but that's just my personal taste. There is absolutely a market for people who will be, well, more immature is a very negative way of putting it, but people who will be more casual. That's probably a better way to put it. So, that I'm not going to grill you on.
Now, this often comes in many different forms, but ever since my Far Cry 6 review, the one I keep hearing come up over and over again is that I should tighten up the script for my videos, or write a script, period, if the video seems particularly scatterbrained.
Yep. And you're saying particularly scatterbrained, so this is clearly something you've heard a lot, and this is not the only time that you've mentioned this, which is another reason why I singled this video out, because I'm very curious to hear more on this topic from you.
And this is something I brought up a few times, but I haven't mentioned in a video in quite a while, is that I don't script any of my videos. Yeah, I don't write any scripts. For the first roughly 6 months, I did attempt to write scripts, or at least extensive notes that could function as a sort of pseudo-script. The thing is, that didn't really work out. My videos were too robotic, and combine that with my awful mic quality and lack of any sensical sound mixing, to the point where you couldn't even understand my voice sometimes.
Now, that sounds to me like you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Because, yeah, I'll be honest, pretty much everyone when they're starting out has those terrible moments. I mean, you go to my first ever review, which was my Diablo 2 review that I made in 2014 back on my other channel. You go back to that, very different to how my videos look now, if you compare that to what I did for Mario Kart World just recently. So, I will grant you, there is absolutely a degree to which you get used to it and you find your cadence. In fact, I just got grilled for my cadence in my Tears of the Kingdom video last year. Was it last year? I think it was. Or has it been 2 years now? Hang on, when did that video come out? Do I still have that other Brave tab open? Yes, I do. Alright, I need to figure this out. I'm going to mute desktop audio in case something starts playing. Okay. When did I put out that Tears of the Kingdom video? Okay, it was a year ago. Good, I'm not going crazy. Mostly. So, there is a risk of sounding too robotic, and I do know that that was another reason that Total Biscuit didn't script his videos, as you could clearly tell when there was a difference between when he was speaking as a script versus when he was going off the cuff. And I've even heard this from people used to me speaking like this, as opposed to when they see me in my reviews. And to be fair, in my case, it was absolutely necessary. You heard me when I was doing Let's Plays back in the day. I was not good at delivering a point off the cuff. I'm doing a hell of a lot better now than I did when I started out. And even then, there's still that small bit of stuttering here and there. So, in that sense, it's a matter of picking your battles. So, by the sounds of it, it would have been better to at least figure out what your vocal cadence should sound like. If it's too robotic, just see it as acting in a sense, because to some extent, the image we put out there isn't completely going to align with how we are in real life. And that's not necessarily even a bad thing. You don't want the internet to know all the ins and outs of your real life. But the emotions that you felt while playing a game are real, and so it's a matter of figuring out, okay, how do I convey that? Or the thoughts I had while playing a video game, or the arguments I want to make, I feel very passionately about them, how do I convey that? And so there is a degree of acting involved, even if that might seem like a dirty word. So it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, how do I get that represented in a script? How do I want that to sound? And just practice makes perfect. So that's the method that I end up using. Granted, you have more subscribers than me, so your method has worked to an extent, but still, I would hesitate to say that the script was the issue, when it sounds more like inexperience and not having found your voice yet was the issue.
The Pinkies and Chainsaw guys are a little scary too, but they only appear a couple of times and are also fairly easy to kill. Pretty weak effort overall on Doom's side. My old videos are...
Okay, so yeah, old videos. I'm sure I could easily be roasted for exactly the same thing. But again, throwing baby out with the bathwater.
Are completely unwatchable. I realize some of you still enjoy them, particularly my Last of Us 2 ones, which were more like shit posts than actual critiques or reviews. Look, there's flat women, okay? I get it. We don't...
Oh boy, here we go. Let's see, how long does this... Actually, you know what? We're dealing with synthetic, man. We should probably keep the transcript out. Or should I let him just ramble and make a fool? You know what? We'll let him do it.
Have breasts. Abby's not flat though. Her breasts are literally shaped like pecs. It
Okay, I'm not gonna get into that whole discussion. Can we move on?
is disgusting. She's utterly disgusting. I don't care what you say.
I'll admit that I don't see the appeal of it either, but oh well. You know what? I shouldn't be surprised.
You know, you can call me like a vain misogynist,
Well, I might call you that, but not for this.
like shallow type of person. She is hard to look at. And actually, that brings me directly to my point,
Oh, boy.
that never at any point since I started this channel did I want to be a professional reviewer, at least in the literal sense.
Well, okay, what do you mean by in the literal sense? Because you're throwing me off with that word.
Now, I certainly have no problem with doing YouTube full-time and making enough money to pay the bills, and I have been doing that for about 2 years at this point.
Well, good for you.
That doesn't mean I had any desire to be professional. I don't.
Okay, but why does professional and scripted necessarily have to come in the same space? There's a lot of stuff that, well, you could argue that pretty much any comedy is, well, a lot of really good comedies are entirely scripted as well. There may be some playing off the audience when someone goes up and does stand-up comedy, but you think they're going to make up all of that set just out of thin air? No, they would have thought through it and had ideas ready and prepared. So the idea that you can be, well, professional and scripted, I feel, is a false dichotomy.
And I think a lot of you also understand that the entire appeal of my channel is that I am as genuine and honest with you as I can possibly be.
I do wonder about that, but carry on.
Now, I do have to engage in some self-censorship because of YouTube terms of service.
You shouldn't, you coward.
But for the most part, I get across exactly what I want to say in every video I've ever made.
I wonder about that. I don't... Well, okay. I'll use one example from your Tears of the Kingdom video. So what I was referencing earlier was a point where you had said, you had looked at the Zonai and said, hey, Goatman. Clearly satanic imagery put in there by the Jews. You didn't say it in such terms, but you implied it very heavily, even after saying, I don't know if that's actually the case, and then talking about secret societies and all that fun stuff. And yet, what exactly were you trying to convey with that? I still don't know why you would say that if you're going to go, I don't know if that's actually the case. So I don't know what you were trying to do with that. Is that just me not being informed? Maybe. I'm not sure I want to be informed by whatever your source is, but that's beside the point. So, is it actually working? And that's what I wonder about, because it clearly didn't land for a lot of people, given the fact that you'll still see people rewatch that EFAP episode when they were looking at your God of War Ragnarok critique.
And in a lot of cases, people disagree, and I get a lot of hate for that, and that's okay. I'm not going to
I do wonder if you actually think that.
pretend my Doom Eternal videos are awesome, or even worse, my Suicide Squad review. That was the most hated video I've ever made. And
Alright, I don't know anything about that, so I'm not going to comment.
even more recently, my Elden Ring videos also had a shit ton of dislikes. Though, in the case of the second Elden Ring video, that was from people who didn't even watch the video. Fun fact, about 70% of the people who clicked on that video stopped watching past the 1 minute mark.
Oh, so that means you made a bad introduction, huh? Yeah? Here's the thing, that is the case with literally every video. You can't make that argument for one video and then not say it for another unless you're going to provide examples of such, because actually, you know what? I'm curious. If I go over to actually, I'll just use the response video since that I've got the unscripted channel open in Brave right now. Let me go over to analytics real quick. Wait a minute, I just realized that I had the desktop audio turned off the whole damn time. Holy crap. I am a moron. Holy shit. Well, I suck. Good thing I've had the transcript here. Okay, so let's see. Let's just we'll just move on then. I suppose I could try and put it back in post. Would that be worth doing? Yeah, it probably would be in order to try and keep things honest. I'll make a note to myself to re-upload this later. Okay. Actually, I'll write that down now. Alright, cool. That should give me enough of a reminder. Alright, now, where was I looking? Oh yeah, I wanted to check my video responses to get a sense for the analytics there. Actually, I can probably look individually. So let's see, the Freerun video. So, 44% stopped watching at that point. Okay, I mean, just my Freerun video, that did fairly well. Only about 13% of people made it to the end. 53% made it past the minute mark or so. Actually, let's see if I can get the exact minute mark, because that's 47 seconds. Yeah, so it is not unexpected for there to not be that many people. Saying that, that's the issue that you run into, is that you can make that argument with literally any video. So if there are obvious comments that suggest that they obviously didn't watch it, then the way to showcase that is not by showing these analytics, because those analytics are practically useless for anyone who knows YouTube. There's always that huge drop off at the beginning. People just click on, listen to the first few seconds, and if they like it, they continue on. If they don't, they click off. That always happens. You get them in the first few minutes, or they generally don't stick around. So, all that to say, this is not the way to prove that. You should showcase a comment where it's obvious that they didn't watch it because, hey, here's a comment that was made that was critical of it. Here's me addressing that exact point. That's how you prove it.
So forgive me if I don't take most criticisms of that video seriously. It did have problems, especially given that was my first attempt at a long-form format.
A long-form format? Again, script.
And I probably could have trimmed it and tightened up certain spaces, and I forgot to bring up serious criticisms I've thought of later. So
and that's why the script is useful.
Certainly is not one of my best videos, but I stand by pretty much everything I said.
So you think they should tighten up a lot, make sure that everything's clarified, and yet you stand by everything? Okay.
But to get back to what started this, the Far Cry 6 review, which is the most viewed video on my channel, and might actually make it to 1 million views, which is kinda crazy. I never would have thought I'd ever make a video get to 1 million views. That video is not scripted at all.
So?
Maybe that comes as a surprise to some people, but all I did was write extensive notes.
I mean, an outline's perfectly acceptable. I'd accept an outline in lieu of a script.
And everything else is pretty much off the cuff, just based on things I've thought of before I sit down to record. Even though I only had 6 days to make it, and honestly, even now...
How long is the video, I wonder? Actually, you know what? I'll look that up real quick. Let's see. Synthetic Man Far Cry 6. How long's that video? Far Cry 6. 45 minutes, 6 days? If you're doing it full time, that seems feasible. Fair enough.
Now, almost a year later, I have no idea how I managed to make that video in 6 days, given...
Well, it would have taken... You would have had to grind pretty hard on that, looking at that. So, is that from starting recording to finish? Or is that from game's release and then it's out? Because that would explain why it got so much attention if you were able to get it out that damn fast. Because it would have still been in people's... Well, it would have still been in a lot of people's minds as they're looking up videos and whatnot. So that would explain why it did well. Oh, so from launch date... Oh, yeah, this is why I should pay attention to the video format more. I forget. Synthetic Man likes to throw in text rather than go and re-record because he doesn't script his videos. Right, I forgot. He's lazy when it comes to that. So from launch date to the videos released 6 days later, I played roughly 30 hours, recorded the audio, and edited it together. Probably over 60 hours of work total. I'm surprised the review wasn't complete shit. The way you describe it? Yeah, I'm surprised it wasn't complete shit. I'd believe it was. But then again, that's me being a cynical bastard. I will not assume that until I would have had a chance to watch it. And honestly, I don't know anything about Far Cry, so I'll let that be.
Given that, like I've said before, I don't get review codes. I've only ever gotten 2, or at least accepted 2.
I'm kind of surprised you get any. Oh, you know what? I shouldn't be surprised by that. So if some marketing guy is just looking to hand out review codes, they're not necessarily going to be looking at every single little thing. You might eventually get on blacklists depending on what people learn or find out if they catch on to how spicy some of your opinions are. But you know what? If they're just shotgunning out to a bunch of YouTubers, they think, oh, guy with over 100,000 subs, send him one. So that's fair.
Been offered a bunch for indie games that you guys wouldn't even watch the video, and honestly, I wasn't interested in most of them anyway. But
yep, you'll run into that.
Saints Row is the first AAA, or middleware really. I don't think it's actually AAA.
Where did Volition fall, actually? So, actually, that's a good question. Let's see. How many employees did Volition have before the end? Okay, so how many employees did they have, roughly? Number of employees? Well, let's see. They had 236 in 2021. Yeah, I'd consider that AAA. I would absolutely consider that AAA.
Game that I've ever gotten a review code for, and even
I'm amazed that you got a review code, honestly, because they must have been really desperate to try and get people to play that then if they handed it off then. But then again, I guess what I said earlier about it being just shotgun it everywhere because, oh god, marketing's struggling. You know what? That's probably enough justification, to be fair. Even if if they had known, I doubt they would have sent it. But then again, instances like what you saw with Kotaku, where they're explicitly denied stuff for, was it breaking NDAs or indulging in leaks? Either way.
even then, it was on launch day, as I said in the video.
Ah, okay, fair enough.
So for some of you saying that my videos feel rushed, and that is your reasoning for wanting me to write a script, the truth is I don't have time.
Okay, so you're going with the time-saving method I mentioned, but is that really the case, I wonder? It can take a while to find the specific clip you're looking for in a game like Far Cry, to be fair, or at least I would assume so, given that it's an open world. I can understand the logistics on that count, but, Well, I guess what's more important, doing it better or doing it fast? That's really what it boils down to. Would you really save that much time? Because, well, actually, you know what? I saw this comment as I was preparing for the video, so I may as well highlight it now. I should probably just clarify something since I've read a few comments about my lack of script. I do edit a lot of pauses out of my audio recordings and often do a lot of retakes for certain lines. I have a tendency to get mealy-mouthed while recording, and often I'll think of a better way to say something after I say it. So, given that, if that is, well, how much time are you wasting on that versus how much time would you quote-unquote waste by writing the script? Oh, let's see, you have an argument there. So some people would probably argue it would be easier to just write a script at that point. Yes, but the way I figure it, I'd still have to do retakes, not necessarily. I've had to do retakes. It's not that long of a process. I will do all the audio editing, I'll look over it, and I'll have maybe a few spots. It's no less, because I'll spend maybe half an hour on a recording session at any given time, and that'll cover about 1,000 words worth of video. And so, a decent amount of time spent. And then it's usually that amount again for the totality of retakes. Not much time at all. And usually, I've identified retakes for different reasons. Either I've thought of a better way to say it, the take was just bad, and it needs to be redone. So, I disagree heavily, because retakes do not take long at all once that you've collected them all and just knock them all out. So, like I mentioned in the video, my delivery is more robotic. Again, baby with the bathwater. For reference, it takes roughly twice the amount of time to finish a recording session than the length of the video, sometimes up to triple. Yep, that's fair. I think it's even longer for me, given that I tend to get a little over-obsessed with it, so we'll leave that be.
I have to release these videos.
Well, you don't have to, but that's the difficulty you run into when you make this your full-time gig, and it's part of the reason why this is probably going to be a hobbyist adventure for me forever, even if I do get the hundreds of thousands of subs, because honestly, I want to be able to say whatever I want when I want and not be rushed on that. If I want to make the if I want to make the 7-hour critique of Fire Emblem Engage I have planned, then I want the freedom to be able to do that right now, because I don't have to chase the algorithm and don't have to constantly be worried about whatever's next. I can do that because I have the stable employment elsewhere. So that is, well, you don't have to, only in the sense that this is now your job and so you have to put something out. But is that necessarily a good thing long term? Is that necessarily sustainable long term?
While the games are still relevant in the algorithm.
Exactly.
I don't have the type of pull where I could make a video a month after the game comes out.
Then what does that say about you?
And people would still watch it. I just don't.
And why do you not have that? Have you thought? That is what I would wonder.
Even with 80,000 subs, I'd say less than half of that are truly faithful viewers.
Yeah, it takes a lot of attention. I mean, you'll see that I think the usual demarcation is, I think, about the regulars are about 1/10, maybe of your sub count, I think was the old metric back in the day, though I don't know how accurate that metric is anymore. I mean, just looking at this, 154,000, and then this is 47,000 over 3 years, almost. So, yeah, there absolutely is a distinction made as a result of that. So, and there are the topical discussion points as well. So, from an algorithm standpoint, I understand that you feel that you're in a rush, and to an extent you are, because you got to pay the bills, you got to make sure that you're getting attention, but is that really worth it?
And even then, there's plenty of vids I've released that have gotten less than a third of my subs to
Which is normal.
click on it, namely anytime I've ever talked about a 3D platformer.
Which is normal regardless of the video, honestly. The only way that you normally get above your sub count is if it's something that is extremely topical in the moment, such as if you are desperately clawing to make sure that you are the first one on the ground. That's normal. And I guess the question is, well, where do you draw the line? What's more important?
Another criticism that seems to be more rare, but I might as well address it anyway, is the lack of any real editing in my videos.
That I'm not going to get on you as much because, honestly, the script is the more important part for me because I can't really talk on that. The scripting that I do, well, not scripting, the editing I do, what the hell? So the editing I do tends to be very minimal as well, and when you're doing a game review, it doesn't have to be that fancy. There are people like Maxor who their style of editing can become a major pull, where you go for just to see how many things he can shove into it frame by frame, and then he makes jokes about it, like in his Baldur's Gate 3 review, where the neurotypicals can't handle this. Which, to be fair, probably not. I definitely don't have the skill set for it. So, in that sense, the editing, I won't necessarily blame you for. There are points where you can absolutely be better. I think a point I highlighted in your Cheers to the Kingdom video is where you're talking about the difficulty of the game, and then you show yourself walking into a beam of death. So, there's only, I feel, a minimum level of care required to make an acceptable video game review, because for most people, they want to see the game in motion, and they want to see the game in motion while hearing cogent points about the game. As long as what you're saying and what's in front largely lines up, you don't need anything fancier than that in order to get your point across. That I won't get you on.
You know, other than just showing some gameplay clips and maybe playing a sound effect, or
you don't even need the sound effects half the time, honestly.
Or I guess I've used maybe a handful of reaction memes.
I don't even use those,
if you can call it that, in videos, but for the most part, it's just my voice, background music, relevant gameplay footage, and maybe,
well, I question the relevance sometimes, but either way,
a clip from one of my streams. Well, the thing is, I have no formal education on video editing software.
Who does on this platform? Well, apart from the really fancy people or stuff like Corridor Digital.
Pretty much everything I know is based on things I've Googled or just figured out by messing around with Premiere. And honestly, even though I am incredibly lazy, and that no doubt contributes
Yeah, I noticed.
to why, the main reason is more just it fits the nature of my channel.
And honestly, that's perfectly acceptable. You don't need a lot of fancy editing, so if you don't need it, why? Then it's just an albatross around your neck if you do indulge in it. Only bring in what you need.
I've been trying to bring back a more honest,
Wait, I thought you were already trying to be honest. What's this about?
highly opinionated side of YouTube that hasn't existed, at the very least, for the past 5 years, and
What channels have you been looking at where that's the case? Or are you just looking at the purely mainstream stuff that's very, I guess, surgical, for lack of a better word, this type of review that you would get from SkillUp? Because, yeah, there are the very straight-laced things like that, but those have always existed. So, and nowadays, you barely find any videos out there that explicitly say review in it. It's usually this factoid about the game, and then it's effectively a review in all but name. So, I do wonder about that.
I feel like that's entirely manufactured. Pretty much all of the most popular old YouTubers were just people giving their opinion. Now,
And?
in a lot of cases, they made it entertaining in some way, like obviously the Angry Video Game Nerd, or Spoonie, or JonTron, etc., etc. These are all people who turn criticism into entertainment. Now,
Well, yeah, that absolutely was a factor, and in old-timey YouTube, that absolutely was the name of the game, where it's not just a matter of, I'm doing this because I really want to inform people about a video game. The objectives then were very different, because YouTube was a very different place back then. So, still, if you're trying to do that, well, why bring that up, though? Because it's not as if you're trying to do that even in your more recent stuff.
of course, what I do is much more straightforward than any of those guys.
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to review video games as brutally honest as possible.
Well, the brutal part, I get. The honest... You know what? I do believe that you mean what you say. I'll put it that way.
Now, of course, this puts my channel in a kind of weird in-between space, with Angry Joe's over-the-top, forced anger being on one end of the scale, and then the other end being the more analytical, quote-unquote, objective criticism of...
Well, Mauler's been... Well, I can
Mauler.
see... Yeah, I could see Mauler in the description, well, in the transcript there. So, Mauler's tried to step away from the word objective because of psychological baggage after talking to people about it, and I got called out for that in his Discord recently on that, funnily enough. But either way, regardless of that, well, you do say quote objective, but let's see. Let me make sure I get the whole thing. So, I don't see why you can't necessarily have both. Because I think there was a video that Fringy, who is another host on EFAT, put out, I think it was on Crash Bandicoot, which I felt had a good middle ground where he is cracking jokes and being silly, but he's also being very analytical about the game. So there is a way to do the middle ground. It's just a matter of how do you try and meet that middle ground.
or Matthew Matosis or Joseph Anderson, etc., etc. Now, of course, the difference between me and those guys is they're much more popular than I am. Their videos are highly edited and scripted, and the more I think
Yeah, they're more popular and still scripted. I wonder what that means.
about it, the less accurate this comparison really is.
Which is why you should script it,
The direction I want
so that you don't make those blunders.
to take my channel was somebody who legitimately does look at video games and criticizes them from an incredibly cynical lens, which
Wait, so how honest is that going? You know what? I believe that you are a very cynical person. Fair enough.
is just my natural lens. This is not a persona I'm putting on. This is legitimately what I think. Unlike channels like Angry Joe, I have never had to fake anger for
I don't know if he's necessarily faking it, given his mind. Well, given how he's acted in the past, but never mind me.
a video. Every single time it's genuine. Now, some of you might not believe that, but no, I've really gotten that mad over things that most normal people would find pretty trivial. But that's because I love video games.
I do wonder about that.
Unlike people who claim they love video games by jerking off whatever the most popular game is released at the time,
Okay, there are absolutely channels and people who just support current thing blindly. I will grant you that, but just because, well, let's let you complete your thought. We'll see if I need to pipe up any more after that.
I've been playing games since I was 5 years old.
And my dad literally used a video game to put me to sleep when I was 6 months old. What's your point?
I've played probably well over 1,000 at this point.
And what's your point?
And there's
You can end up hating the medium by proxy if you spend that long immersed in something, so what's your point?
game reviewers who have played twice as many games as I have, so again, this is not meant to be a flex.
Then why bring it up?
But it has certainly been concerning to me, especially since back in the Gamergate days.
Oh god, we're hearing it again! Two completely separate reasons to bring it up, too! I can guarantee that! Oh my god. One person bringing it up for no damn reason, and I'll grant you this, Synthetic Man, you at least have a point to bring this up, given how much of a controversy that was.
That criticism for gaming has slowly become less and less critical.
What channels are you watching if that's the case?
Right. And so honestly, I've wanted to make video game content for a long time. I just never really knew how to do it, and I honestly didn't have a PC that could do it until...
Yeah, to be fair, I got my start doing older games from the perspective of a newcomer, partially because I didn't have the PC to handle the really difficult stuff. Well, the really high-end stuff anyway. I had just a potato back in the day. There's still pieces of it in my closet behind me.
Till about 3 years ago. And so here I am. I have no plans to ever be professional in any capacity. It
There's a difference between professional and, well, we've been over that.
doesn't mean that I don't want my videos to have well-structured arguments and examples.
Then script them!
Obviously, I still plan to do that, and I do want to make more
But you haven't been! What do you mean by continue?
videos in the same caliber as the Far Cry 6 review, but it is pretty rare that I have that much experience with a franchise where I can come up with several examples off the top of my head to compare to older games. I mean,
Which is why it's good to stay with what you know and make sure that you have a wide breadth. And it's also why it's important to make sure that you do your research and plan things out. You are just proving my point more.
Resident Evil, I certainly can, as I played pretty much all of the games, but a lot of times when I review modern games, I don't have extensive experience with the franchise, so it's much more difficult to create a review like that.
So are you only doing it then because it'll get a lot of attention? You know what, that would explain why you talked about Baldur's Gate 3, because I highly doubt you have experience with CRPGs beyond Baldur's Gate 3, but no matter. Let's see. What other... Is there anything more that needs to be said? So, the other sections. You never review good games anymore. I'm not too concerned about that. Because, honestly, that's a conversation that's not too interesting to me. Because if the stuff that's popular is... well, if there's a lot of bad games coming out, there's a lot of bad games coming out. Although, actually, you know what? Just as a contrast, what have you talked about over the last however long? So, you never talk about good games anymore? Okay, let's see. What have you been talking about? Have you actually even been talking about games recently? Okay, good question, actually. So, oh well. I'm sure we could get into detail on that, because it looks like you've just been doing more general topics lately, unless you've been... Yeah, it looks like you've just been doing... Yeah, sometimes more general topics. Unless the titles are just clickbait and you're focused on a specific game while you're talking about it. That looks like it's most likely. Either way, I'm not too concerned about that. Is there anything I want to concern myself with beyond that? Let's see. Well, we'll give him a couple minutes on this topic, but I think that's all I really cared about for my own curiosity. Let's see, because honestly, I don't believe he's a grifter. I do believe that he's genuine, which is part of the problem. Honestly, I would unironically respect him more if he were a grifter, because holy shit, would that be amazing acting. But either way, we'll go on for another minute, and if there's nothing more of interest there, we'll go ahead and move on.
So to address probably the most popular criticism of my channel, at least amongst regular viewers, they say I never talk about good games, especially not good modern games, because on occasion I'll still review older games from my childhood, or actually used to review some older games I'd never played before at people's request or on Patreon. Honestly, I just couldn't stand to do that anymore after a certain point. My passion for YouTube has dwindled despite my increasing success.
So why turn it into your job? But either way, it looks like it's mostly just addressing stuff that he's getting more from his regulars and not from the wider community, so we'll go ahead and leave it there. We will go ahead and leave it there. No need to dwell on that too much. So, I guess I'm going to run out real quick to get a drink, and we'll go ahead and see to the final video. Give me 1 second. You want out while you're at it, Cheeto? Alright, I'm back. So, those two videos were pretty much as I expected on both counts. I'm not particularly impressed by either, but wasn't expecting too much. But hopefully, this final video will be able to impress. At least that's the hope, because Golden Owl's video talking about the Switch 2 price shenanigans, at least with respect to the video game side of it, I felt was probably the closest to a good video of the four that I've covered so far. Because in a lot of ways, there was a lot of good information, solid editing, apart from a couple points here and there where it was a bit too loud on one or two bits. And it was an instance where it was a topic he was clearly knowledgeable on. It's just that he was a bit too careless with his words and a bit too callous in a couple cases as well. Especially with respect to blanket statements about gamer entitlement, or as he put it. So, to give a brief overview, since the video response I made on him is the least viewed. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the most recent one. We'll see. Maybe that's what I should have focused on. Either way, so, claims to be a former game designer from Singapore with a business MBA, as discussed in the response video. So, this is it, and the topic at hand is one that I'm also interested in, because when I played League of Legends back in the day, and even to an extent, whenever I do play something like TF2 or Marvel Rivals, I'm usually some sort of supporting role. He specifically calls out healers, which isn't explicitly what I focused on, but I understand why people don't like the support role, or the healer role more generally, because they don't want to be the guy who makes sure the health bars are topped off. They want to be the people who makes the health bars go down. And there is some primal understanding of that, I get, on that level. But what I enjoy about the supporting and healing roles is that it's less a matter of having the pressure directly on you, but a matter of making sure, alright, I don't need to be the big man on campus. I just need to make sure my opponent isn't. And so there was a certain appeal back when I played League of Legends of playing the support role, in part because no one else wanted it, so I could reliably get it, and very rarely had to go outside of my niche with something like jungle or top lane. But along with that, it's a matter of saying, alright, so, my job is not to win. My job is to make the enemy's day as miserable as possible, and to do my best to ensure that whatever mistake my carry makes is as minimal as possible. So, that is my objective as a support role, and that was something I really enjoyed, because I really got into the player psychology of it as well. The fact that I look at it and say, okay, so you're playing this character, so that's typically how you act, and oh, you're going off the beaten path a little bit, so that's this variation, so you have that kind of mindset, so now I know how to approach you. So doing all of that player psychology stuff was really fun for me. And I managed to get, I think, low diamond back when I played back in 2013, 2014, around that time. It has been a very long time. I can't recreate that right now because, well, Linux, and kernel level anti-cheat is a bitch, but still, whatever the case may be, I like the support role. So, I'd be curious to know what kind of arguments Golden Owl gives in order to explain that. I'll be a Gilgamesh. I remember in FF14 the tank queue is instant and the DPS queue is 5 hours. Yep, pretty much.
Healers, clerics, white mages, medics. They come in many forms and go by many names.
Oh yeah, I like playing the medic. Medic's fun.
But their job remains the same: heal their allies and keep them alive. The healer archetype is one of the core defining player roles in all of video games, and are not only a common sight in many genres, but are also one of the most important too. In some games, their impact is so significant that the outcomes of entire matches, battles, and even games are decided solely based on their absence or presence.
Yep, pretty much. I've seen that with TF2. The team with the medic all tends to do better because, hey, they're able to stay on the field for longer. And that was another part of why I like the healer and supporting roles as well, because they are the important ones in order to make sure everyone remains standing. So it is a critically important part that if you're very good at it, you don't get a lot of appreciation. It's like IT in that sense. You only go pester them if something's going wrong, but there's this personal satisfaction that you're sat there going, alrighty, I am very pleased with how things are going right now. That I'm able to manipulate the battlefield in such a way that everything is going in my favor. So there's that aspect that I really enjoy as well.
But despite their importance, dedicated healing specialists aren't very popular to play or use, and developers sometimes have a difficult time convincing players to use them.
To be fair, it's also incredibly different to balance them properly as well. Also, hang on. Oh, that's the super boss that convinced me not to go after the super bosses. That's kind of funny.
And developers sometimes have a difficult time convincing players to use them. Try to recall the most prominent memory you have of actually playing as or using a healer character.
Well, okay, I've been using the support role more generally, since that's what I'm used to from League of Legends, but healer role, I mean, usually, there was a time on Medic I had 3 Uber charges because I stayed alive that long. But otherwise, and then there's the points where you decide, okay, screw this, syringe gun, when you're in a tight spot, and pull off something crazy that they don't expect from you. And to be fair, when I played Overwatch, my favorite was Zenyatta, so there was always fun related to that. And that sort of carried over for what little I've played of Marvel Rivals, with me playing Mantis when I need a healer and Captain America when I need a tank.
Chances are, it's not as impressive compared to your experience using other character types.
Not visually impressive maybe, but still personally satisfying.
In both single and multiplayer game contexts, you tend to see players either actively avoid using them, or use them as minimally as possible.
To be fair, in Xenoblade's case, I do tend to avoid the supporting role, but that's just because I'm bad at it. From my perspective, you almost never see healers in casual. Yeah, that's the problem you run into.
Examples of such games are Genshin Impact, Pokemon, Xenoblade Chronicles, and so on.
Healers in Pokemon? What are you referring to with that specifically? Is that just a matter of, hey, make sure that your Pokemon are topped off, or are you talking about stuff like recover and make sure you've got an Oranberry equipped? I'd be curious to know what you mean by that. Maybe I'm just not into Pokemon enough to know. Wait, please, give me some pointers. I need to keep beating the brother at Pokemon X and Y. More on that later.
In many of these games, dedicated healer archetypes exist, but they tend to either be undervalued or never used, or are appreciated and valued but rarely played anyway. This isn't always a problem, but in some cases, it can be. In gacha games, players don't spend money for healers. In single-player games, players often neglect and fail to upgrade their healers.
Wait, fail to upgrade? Is that actually a common trend? Okay, now I'm curious. Oh, you mean Wish users? Remind me what Wish does? Hang on. Pokemon Wish. Remind me what that does. Non-damaging normal type move in Gen 3. Oh, interesting. Huh. Fair enough. Okay, so it is possible then, though it doesn't seem... Though the fact that I had to be told that suggests that it's not a super popular strategy. Maybe I need to do more research.
Affecting the game's difficulty. In multiplayer games, people never want to play them and either fight amongst each other so they get to party with the one dude who decided to play cleric, or bully some guy into switching to healer just so their team stops losing. Overwatch, you suck.
To be fair, Overwatch has that problem where they tried to go too MOBA with it. Well, too Dota with it, I should say, to go back to the earlier conversation. Wish is used a lot in OG high-level play? I must not be as aware of it then.
I need healing. Experience Oblivion.
Okay, good at it. This is why this video is last, because this is going to be the breath of fresh air after dealing with the other two.
Of course, that isn't to say that some players can't have fun with dedicated healers,
Yep, I am that weird person.
or that the playstyle of healer characters is inherently unfun and boring to play as.
It's not as visually flashy, yes, but still.
After all, playstyle and fun are ultimately highly subjective and dependent on the individual, and many players do enjoy playing supportive roles and assisting teammates more than bearing the pressure of choking game-winning plays.
Yep, that's me. I'm that person.
There is genuine fun to be found in playing and excelling in a supportive role. This video isn't about you guys. You're
Alright, this isn't about me. Should I click off right now? No, I'll be curious to see what kind of mindset is brought forth then. We'll see how long we end up going with this, because I want to make sure I can offer commentary. We'll see how much of it's relevant to me.
cool. This video is about why many other players tend to not enjoy either using or playing as that dedicated healer role.
Well, that should still be fascinating to me, so let's hear you out, good owl.
The obvious response to all this is to say because healers aren't fun to play, but that's just one reason out of many. In fact, it's arguably one of the least important reasons to consider. Some games don't even get that far.
What do you mean, not the most important reason? Okay, carry on.
There are actually many other, more important reasons which cause healers or healing mechanics to be not just unfun, but also unnecessary, suboptimal, or even outright detrimental to a player's experience. And these aren't due to gamers being stupid or toxic either.
Oh, are you gonna get into game balance issues? Okay, I have the perfect example for this. League of Legends, there's a character called Soraka. So, she is probably the only quote-unquote traditional healer within League of Legends. Other characters will have healing abilities. My main back when I played was Nami, and she does have a healing move, but it's not the primary reason you gun for her. The primary reason I used her is because she was really versatile, having a stun, a slow, and well, two slows actually when you consider the ultimate, and a way to speed people up on top of the heal. So very versatile skill set. So that was the reason I used her, but Soraka was a case where she pours out a ton, and I mean a ton of healing, as in tank with 2000 HP relative to the carry's 1000 HP. That 2000 HP going up in a single hit if you dump into ability power. That's how I remember it, and because of that, for a long time, Soraka was at the state where she was either meta-defining or non-existent, because it was incredibly difficult to balance her as the one character among that who could be a proper healer, as opposed to literally everyone else who couldn't even match that. And so, eventually what they had to do is basically say, okay, as you heal, you sacrifice some of your own health, in order to ensure that there is still a cap on how much she can heal. And that was a decision that was made, I think, years after she was initially introduced, after the most recent attempt of her just being completely broken and just overpowered. So there are absolutely instances where it is purely down to game mechanics that's the fault. And I think what he's going to bring up here, if he's got Overwatch on screen, is Mercy being able to come in and just overwrite like that just your entire progress with the original ult, where she runs in and your entire team is suddenly back to normal. The big comparison there was Medic. You have to preemptively uber charge in order to properly take advantage of that. You could only reasonably apply it to one person in most instances. Well, a normal player who is starting out would only apply it to one person, but even at its best, you could only maybe apply it to 2, maybe 3 people if you're really good at microing between the 2 or 3 people. 2 you could manage pretty easily once you get the timing of it. 3 is really tough, and I don't think I ever properly mastered that, or were in many circumstances where that was necessary for the times I played. So you have to preemptively trigger that before they die. And then you can use that aggressively, which feels really impactful. Mercy comes in, though, and instead of allowing you to thrive and create this cool play, it's a matter of, well, it feels really bad on the enemy side to just suddenly have all of your progress Thanos snapped into oblivion. So, in that sense, again, game mechanics. I remember Mercy in Overwatch was overpowered? Oh yeah, pretty much. So Mercy old ult was a do-over button? Yes. So her current iteration, if assuming it hasn't changed from when I last played Overwatch, which was before 2, the current iteration is that her original ultimate, well, her current abilities have her able to resurrect one person who has fallen. Her original ultimate well, her current ultimate just has her fly around, able to more easily dash around and fly around. Her old ultimate could revive literally the entire team all at once. Which, when you are down to the last 10 seconds on a payload mission, that makes a major difference, even if you allow yourself to die as a result of doing that. That is enough to turn a game, and it sucks to be on the receiving end of that.
Well, not all of them at least. Some of these reasons are the result of how a game is contextually designed. Games are complex systems with many moving parts to consider, and sometimes achieving a certain design objective causes unintentional negative consequences elsewhere.
Pretty much.
Healer archetypes are sometimes
Also, you're gonna get people mad at you for showing that, but never mind me.
one such victim of that. There is no straightforward answer for this. Every game is different and expects different things out of their players.
Yep, pretty much.
And the subjective opinions of players themselves just muddy the waters even further. In fact, player opinions regarding healers are so divisive that when I ran a poll on which topic to cover for my next video, it ended up with a perfect 50-50 split. Great job there, guys.
Pretty much.
I'm sure Thanos would be proud of you.
Perfectly balanced? Come on, do the edit.
So let's go over
Aww.
for a couple of these reasons. Let's talk about why healers might not be useful in some games, why some players don't enjoy using healers, and what makes for a great, fun to play healer character. Just a quick disclaimer before I start, this video focuses on the mechanical and game design elements, and does not take into account aesthetic elements such as character design, personality, story, voice acting, and so on. This is important to clarify because gamers are not always motivated by gameplay reasons. It is a fairly common occurrence for a player to use a character simply because they like them, and
Yep, that's fair.
need no other reason beyond that.
Heck, there's a lot of people who jumped into Overwatch who would never be caught dead playing a competitive shooter purely because they like the aesthetic.
In fact, the entire gacha monetization model relies on that motivation.
Pretty
Some
much.
players are just insanely dedicated to their waifu who just happens to be a healer, and while I respect the commitment, that kind of emotional character attachment is unrelated to the key point of this video.
Obligatory emotional damage meme? It doesn't fit as well. Never mind me. That's what I get for pouring myself a drink.
I may feel that Overwatch's Mercy has a personality so basic that it could balance the pH of industrial grade acid.
Ow! Nice. Good joke. Actually, I remember, there was an Overwatch vs TF2 animation that really cemented that in my mind, where I think it's the medic, TF2 medic just going, "I have heals a man who will kill you," to Mercy's just horrified face. Glorious.
And that Team Fortress 2's medic has a personality so outrageously funny that he could bring a man back to life via laughter alone.
Yep.
But neither of that matters.
It matters a little bit, but for the sake of your gameplay discussion, yeah, it doesn't matter. But still, it does matter.
Focusing on mechanical game design here.
Fair enough.
Alright, now,
Why do you have a knife? Hey, what have you got there? A knife. No!
let's go practice medicine.
At least the editing's on point. I heard the Mercy old used invincibility frames. I don't recall there being any iframes associated with it. There was a brief period. Let's see. There might have been a brief period where Mercy was invincible, and there's, I think, about a second or two where you're outlined in gold before you're able to move and be shot at, and then shoot in return. But I don't remember there being iframes involved.
I love that.
Okay, what kind of joke are you making?
Oh my god. Is this you on Titanic subtitle?
Alright, that's a bit overdone, but okay. You know what? They can't all be winners.
God damn it, yeah.
It keeps getting better.
Okay, why did the video settings just crater? Come on, give me 1080p.
So
Or was it just because you zoomed in? Yeah, okay, it's back to normal. It must have just from zooming in. Never mind me, I'm being a stickler. Although it keeps saying encoding overloaded and keeps not doing full 60 FPS, not that it matters for a YouTube video. Hang on. What does system monitors say? No, that's system settings, not monitor. Come on. Which reminds me, I need to set up a monitor that properly tracks the GPU. Well, CPU and memory isn't being thrashed. Oh wait, it might be because... Actually, if it's an encoding overload... I wonder if it's because of my main data disk, because I've been utterly thrashing it lately. Hang on. Oh, there's plenty of space in there. It's probably highly fragmented given the number of videos I've had to generate over the last few last few weeks especially. I should just... Actually, what kind of defragging is done in Linux? I'll have to check sometime.
Scenario 1. I don't need healing. Or, as I like to call it, the Genshin Impact problem. Because Hoyoverse somehow manages to stumble into every single issue which I'm about to cover for multiple games. To begin, let me ask you this, my viewer. Why would you, as a player, ever need a healer? Go pause the video if you need to. I'll give you a second.
Okay, so... It depends on the kind of game. That's the short version.
Do you get to the Cloud District very often? Oh, what am I saying? Of course you don't. I'll have you know that there's no...
Okay.
I didn't understand the joke, but I don't know Genshin Impact, so we'll just move on.
You good? For most of you, the answer is probably something like to heal the team or to keep everyone alive. And those answers are correct. Now let me ask you another follow-up question. What will you define as everyone being kept alive? I'll give you another second to think about it. Alright, let's resume. Generally, in most games, as long as allies' HP is above 0, they are still alive and able to fight, and the healer's job is to restore HP, thereby keeping everyone alive. Seems straightforward enough. So what happens if we are presented with a situation where that doesn't need to happen? What if we could just prevent HP from hitting 0 via other means?
Okay, so... Is that the conversation that's had around Genshin? I don't know enough to say, so are there enough mechanics involved in Genshin where you can either block damage or avoid it?
If you stop to think about it, HP is basically just a resource which indicates how much can I get hurt before dying. But if a character just does not get hurt, they don't really need HP restored. Healing is essentially just a defensive mechanic which helps a character stay alive, one among potentially many. Shielding, dodging, invulnerability frames,
Okay, so I guess that's my point answered.
blocking, counters, parrying, stuns, revive, increasing defensive stats. Defensive mechanics such as these are able to reduce or outright prevent damage altogether, and depending on a game's design, could be more crucial for survival than just healing alone. For example, Genshin Impact's shield mechanics apply a temporary buffer over a character's HP, which takes damage before HP.
Well, I guess that answers my question.
Activating ultimates also provides invincibility frames, ensuring the fancy animations aren't interrupted, unless you're Arlecchino, in which case that's quite unfortunate.
I don't know the game, so I won't comment on that.
And of course, being an action game, a well-timed dodge can help avoid damage altogether. And even though Genshin's the bigger and more famous game, its newest sibling game provides a much better demonstration of this. Zenless Zone Zero is an action game with a huge focus on team swap parry and dodging mechanics, with all aspects of combat centering around the mechanic, both defensively to avoid damage and offensively to set up special chain attacks. Notably, these universal defensive mechanics are so powerful that not one single player character in the entire game provides any sort of healing skill whatsoever. Players are completely reliant on item pickups to restore health. This is almost unheard of for a gacha game, where healers are a staple. In fact, the game has only one single defensive character at all as of launch.
Okay, so... Yeah, since that I don't know the game, I feel like I should be talking more, but let's see. Yeah, don't have a lot to say on that, so that's mostly just a retelling of mechanics. So, interesting that that's the case. I don't know enough about gacha games to comment, so I'll take that as... Well, I'll take you at your word on that.
which provides shields and counterattacks. His name is Ben Bigger. He's a bear. He's also an accountant and in charge of his company's financials. He's
Okay, then.
a great guy. I love him.
I'm sensing some favoritism here, but very well.
Just aside, this issue can crop up in traditional RPGs too. Xenoblade Chronicles' evasion stat grants a percentage chance to not take damage from attacks entirely. Building characters for evasion and having them draw aggro from enemies is a perfectly viable way of protecting the rest of the party, resulting in the strange situation that is a half-naked disabled man with only one functional arm somehow being the game's best dodge tank.
So I have heard. Oh no, are you gonna do that stun bet over there? Do that stun bet over there.
If nothing else, you must remember your family.
That stun bet over there!
I see that nudity makes you stronger in this game. The wider the range of defensive mechanics a game has, the less significant healing becomes as a result. The game's design will adapt to accommodate these mechanics and give them all meaningful in-game uses. Layering on multiple defensive mechanics just results in there being very little damage taken for healing to undo.
Unless you then ratchet up how much damage is dealt and forcing you to use all of them, but that can be frustrating in its own right if you have to master all of these systems, and that's the difficulty you run into with JRPGs, so double-edged sword there.
If the game has a blocking mechanic, dodge chance, damage reduction, and defense stats, how often are you, as a player, realistically expecting to take significant damage? Healing only repairs damage. It doesn't do anything to prevent it. If there is no damage taken, healing serves no purpose beyond insurance. And if a player gets hit while unprotected and their entire HP bar gets instantly deleted in one shot, that insurance served no purpose.
Well, yeah, that is the risk that you take with that, and that's why one-shots can be so frustrating, or at least one of the reasons.
Thank you, Dark Souls.
What? I need to play Dark Souls, apparently. I mean, you guys have told me that I need to, but damn. What?
In these situations, healing alone becomes unable to be used as a standalone
I'm sorry, I'm still in shock over that. That was a good edit.
defensive measure, and becomes valued as a secondary supplement to the primary defensive mechanics. At that point, why not just discard healing entirely and focus more on making the actual primary defensive mechanic better?
Yeah, and if you're doing single-player stuff, that's perfectly acceptable.
In Genshin and Star Rail, you could just ignore healers entirely and rely on just improving shielders and be completely fine. And let's not forget about games which have player characters that don't even have a HP bar and just naturally die in a few hits. Such design is naturally incompatible with conventional healing mechanics. That being said, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Again, healing is simply one option out of many in terms of defensive mechanics, and doesn't always need to be used. Games like Zenless Zone Zero prove that as long as players have a good variety of defensive options, healing isn't necessary for a fun, well-designed gaming experience.
Yep, fair enough. Okay, so I'm finding that I have less to say on this one, so I think we'll leave that there as well. And thankfully this time, not because there's nothing to say, but because, hey, worth going to the actual video and checking out yourself. So there we are. There's the timestamp we were at. We finished around the 12:23 mark. Alright, may as well add this to the watch later and check this out on my own time, or at least finish this on my own time. There we are. Okay, so I think that's where we'll leave it for tonight then. Joe, let's see. Is there anything that I want to say then before we call it a night? Because I was wondering how far we get with that. So what other stuff does he bring up? Alternate heal sources? Fair enough if you've got potions or stuff on the ground. Cost and affordability, yeah, that's fair. Wanting to stay at low HP, yep, there are scenarios like that. Healers are not fun to play, oh, that'd be a fascinating one. Let's see, and then reinforcement from the game and other players, yeah, that's fair. And then you show Overwatch there, that's fair. Okay, cool. So, Looks to be a well-made video just based on the first few, so I would highly recommend you go check that out. So, to that end, since that I screwed up the audio on part of the stream, I'm probably going to unlist this shortly after it goes out, and we'll be uploading a version, well, I know Xenoblade X has no direct healers. We should do funny video? What do you mean by funny video? Let's see. But either way, so I guess then I'll be eventually unlisting the stream. I'll send a link to, well, I'll be re-uploading it after I fix the issue because if you just caught up with us, I ended up messing up the desktop audio at one point. Do the Xenoblade 3 cut content? I just wanted to focus on these particular 3 tonight. We can see to that another day. My throat's already hating me right now, so I should call it a night. So I'll go ahead and make sure to fix up the audio there in post, re-upload it, so that it's set aside, well, so that it's a better viewing experience, hopefully. I'll be curious to see how the audio balance ended up turning out. It looked like it was a bit low on my side, but hey, I had the pause button, so it's not as severe in this case. So, either way, that should be all tonight. Someday, yes. If it's not in the Discord, go ahead and throw it in there, Gilgamesh, and we'll see to it someday. So, that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about, well, let's go ahead and do a quick channel update. That's the other reason I need to stop. I've been going for too long. So, since that this was done just as much in reference to the response videos as it was to the fact that we haven't done React content in a while, when is the next response video going to be, or when is that Keep Your Politics to Yourself video essay I mentioned in the free room video going to come out? Short version, I don't know. But not for a while. All I know for certain right now is that I am deep in the weeds for a project for the review channel. It is in the Discord, cool. So, I am deep in the weeds for a project on the review channel. And so to give you a sense for that, let's see. Actually, I've got the document pulled out right now, so let's see. I may as well just show it since that I'm doing a desktop record. So this is a document I'm using in order to track how well my game library is translated into a Linux environment. Here's the bottom of the list. I've only got one more game in the Sega Mega Drive and Genesis Classics collection I want to check out, but here's the bottom of the list. Let's see, I think, which ones are the ones I worked on today? Hang on. I thought I had a few more on here. Hang on. Hold up. I could have sworn. Hang on. What did I have in Wave 5? Hang on, where were my notes on Shadow Warrior 3? Hang on, I did that today too. Hang on, what? Oh, wait a minute, I remember this complaining about read-only mode because I had a hard crash. Right, crap. It'll be before the Pillars of Eternity video? At this rate, yes, Gilgamesh. I'm not allowed to talk about that video anymore until it's ready. So, that's all I'll say. So, that in mind, I am deep in the weeds on that. According to Steam, I have 15 games left to look at, and according to that document, I've got about 40 or so to look at GOG. And in order to have this video ready before October 16th, which is the end of Windows 10 support, and ideally I'd want it done a couple weeks before then. I'm currently aiming for mid-September on that count. Your next response video will be out before... You're not setting a high bar, Gilgamesh, even then. So, right now my focus is on the review channel as far as editing, especially now that I don't have to worry about Xenoblade 2 Let's Play stuff. So my expectation right now is this. I'm going to be deep in the weeds on stuff for the review channel for the next however long, at least till mid-September. And as a result of that, I don't have a clear timeline on when we'll be seeing anything outside of the usual stream night on Saturdays. So, as of right now, and honestly, it's probably for the best if it's left that way, because what I found with the Synthetic Man and to an extent the Jim Sterling videos, when I was looking at them, as those were very much opportunities to experiment with the format, just as much as they were, I wonder what you two have been up to lately. So, very much quote-unquote easy targets, and even then, there are still points where you can criticize me on both of them. So, by that standard, well, we'll see how it turns out, but my thinking is that The response videos are best when I see a topic and am very curious about that topic in particular. In fact, for those of you who are more regular to the channel, you might notice, hang on, aren't you normally in an incognito window for this? Reason being, this is the unscripted channel. So what I decided to do is, the benefit of having more than one YouTube account is that I can have multiple algorithms effectively, because we talk about the broad YouTube algorithm as far as metrics and all that fun stuff to try and figure out, okay, what's trending and whatnot. But the reality is that each individual, based on what they're watching, effectively has their own, algorithm. So what I see on the review channel is going to be different than what I see on the unscripted channel, with that being more of a time capsule of the rare times that I watch a video on the unscripted channel as opposed to the review one, since for a long time the review channel was the main channel instead of just one of the channels. So by virtue of that, I'm thinking what I'll do is, whenever there's a video that either you as the audience wants me to watch, or whenever I personally am interested in watching something to react to, I'm thinking I watch it through the unscripted channel and allow that to be the point where I say, okay, here is the algorithm. Sans Inkara animation is really good. It's in the recommended. Oh yeah, I've seen it before. That's why it's showing up. I think it's the one I've seen. Oh wait, 6 months ago? That's really damn recent. What the heck? Hang on. 6 months ago? Is that a re-upload? Wait, it's got 18... How long ago was that? Because those edits were around back in the late 2010s. Hang on. How'd that happen? Although I'd hate to react to that live, honestly, because those kind of videos take a lot of work. You should just go seek them out yourself. So, either way. That in mind, I'm thinking I'll just tailor the unscripted channels recommended and the algorithm that I see there to stuff that I would be interested, that either you or me would be interested in either reacting to or responding to. And if a subject comes up that I am deeply passionate to cover and really interested, it's a remake of the old one, fair enough. So if there's a topic that comes up that I'm really interested in and really want to check out or talk about or what have you, in fact, some of the pirate software discourse has been fascinating as well, because I don't have a lot of dev experience as of right now because I've been mostly doing QA, but that has been fascinating to see stuff referenced. Oh yeah, that thing in college, and oh yeah, that principle, or oh yeah, that makes sense. That's been fascinating. But either way, all that to say, we'll let the unscripted channel exist as a place for that. And honestly, once that the Xenoblade 2 Let's Play is done, I'll just be using it as an experiment for all sorts of stuff eventually. I don't even want to say what I have planned for that. Let's see, you should make a video on X and Y with the Terra leak before ZA. I don't know what you mean by the Terra leak, but either way, all I will say right now is that, well, I don't anticipate that I'd be able to get a video out on on X and Y before Legends ZA comes out. What I will say is that there is going to be something ill-timed relating to that. That is all I will say. Well, actually, would it really hurt to say, actually, because it would probably be going up on the game dungeon anyway. I may as well say it. So, right now, in anticipation of Pokemon Legends ZA, I don't know, I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong whenever I see the Legends ZA trailers, but to make sure that it's not just a matter of me just not being knowledgeable on Kalos, I convinced the brother to join me on playing X and Y simultaneously, so we're both recording both of our perspectives and having it out every once in a while. Well, every session or two, as we're making our way through the game. I got away with all sorts of stuff. Oh, the Terra leak was the metric ton of behind the scenes on Pokemon. Oh, right. Oh, that's what you meant. That massive data dump? Oh, that's what you're referring to. I'd be reticent to go near that, as I believe that, well, I don't know if there'd be anything that I could bring up there that hasn't already been said. But either way. X and Y, though, would I be able to get an interesting video out on that before Legends ZA? I might be able to, well, I could experiment with something maybe as a ramble. How is it so far? It's Pokemon. I haven't got, well, let me put it this way. We haven't even gotten to the second gym yet. And the trainer battle, well, the battles that we've done against each other have been very silly. Because the first time round, well, honestly, the 2 times I've won, I've gotten away with murder, it feels like. Oh, I feel so bad for how I won yesterday. Oh, man. That was special. Because I thought, I'm seeing all these strategies about defensive Pokemon, and I need something to switch into when we have equal Pokemon, and because we house ruled that, hey, no switching if you've got more Pokemon than your opponent. And so I said, okay, what if I switch into Snorlax and just bludgeon you to death with brute force? And it worked. Oh, I felt so guilty. It won't be nearly as effective once he gets a good fighting type and once our starters have evolved to the 3rd stage, but damn. I got away with murder. And then I'm sat there going, oh, let's use Sand Attack. The 2 times I've used Sand Attack, it has the brother has suffered immensely for it. X and Y suffers from being rushed and having no 3D version or DLC. Well, 3rd version, sorry. Yeah, I heard that there was a Z planned, but it ended up being shelves for one reason or another. But either way, it's been interesting so far. That will be long-term plans, but either way, I think I've rambled enough. So as far as the here and now, my focus as far as unusual videos is remaining on the review channel in order to get the Linux test video done. Honestly, even with... It's going to be a rush to get that done if I want it done 2 weeks at least before October 16th. Hey, is it October 16th or 14th when Windows 10 support ends? Either way, it's going to be a long journey because even getting 3 or 4 done a day, I mean, I may as well show you the games that I have left. So, these are the games that I have left to test. Half-Life 2 is still on here because I want to look at Episode 2. I've only hit the base game in Episode 1. And then I've still got 3 games in the Master Chief Collection I need to see too. So, yeah, there's a lot to worry about with these. And that's just the 15 that I have to worry about for Steam. And I'll be adding, well, technically adding another game on there for when we get to that in a couple weeks. Speaking of, before I get distracted by chat, I should give the rest of the channel updates so that I can close this out and give my voice a rest. So, important stuff there. I'm not going to be able to stream next week. That I know for certain. The only way that it'll happen is if I somehow do an odd day like Thursday. Because of that, I've decided to pre-record something to go out on Saturday. So, because I'm going to be busy on both the Tuesday when I was experimenting, as well as that Saturday. So, have I checked ease yet? I'm not worrying about any game that I haven't played yet. Because I wanted to try and keep it to games that I have a point of reference for how they work in Windows, so that I know, okay, this is a Windows, so is this a Windows issue or is this a compatibility layer issue? Since I don't know that for ease, I've been avoiding it. This is just, even with games I have played, I've still got over 100, so I'll be good. Either way, so putting that aside, let's see, so next week there won't be a stream. I've got something pre-recorded. I'm pretty sure I know what I want to do for it, though I haven't set it in stone yet, which probably means I'm going to get a suggestion from chat in about 5 seconds, but either way, I've got about 5 different options. You don't need to send suggestions. I don't need more complications. Still, there will be something pre-recorded for this time next week. And then after that, we begin a new game. I know what the game's going to be. I've said it already, so I don't feel a need to really elaborate any further. So, I will leave it there. We'll be starting a new game next week, and just as a reminder of the long-term plan, once the Xenoblade 2 Let's Play is done, I think the current schedule is September 23rd? Yes, September 23rd will be when we resume playing through Xenoblade 3. And that will be a Tuesday time. I hope it's DK64, it is not. If you're referring to the new game, it is not. And it is not a React Night. That was one of the options, but that isn't what I have in mind if it is a React Night. I'm reticent to do 2 in a row, though honestly, I do want to try and get to the habit of doing a monthly something different. And I do have a good topic, I think, if I do want to well, if I do want to do another React night, but either way, we will see to that in due course, right? So, my voice is dead, effectively. Let's see, is there anything so I'm going to make sure that I've seen the chat, then I'm calling it a night. So, South Kalos was planned, it's in the Terra League? Huh, fascinating. Let's see, is there anything else? I think that covered everything of import. So, we'll go ahead and leave it there. So, thank you for joining me on this. Very different from my normal fare, and I've got a bit of editing to do to make sure I fix up where the audio went awry, but it should be easy enough to figure out where that went wrong. I want the DK64 video one day. You'll get it eventually. Maybe. Either way, that'll be all for now, so thank you all for stopping by. I hope this was entertaining for you. Certainly fascinating for me, and hopefully there'll be plenty more where that came from, since that I'll be able to use the unscripted channel to branch out if I ever need something different from my normal fare, and hopefully it works out okay in that sense. So, for now, thank you all once again for stopping by, and I will see you all, well, I won't see you next week, I'll have something prepared for next week, but until then, I will see you all in a couple weeks for the new game at the store. Till then, take care.